Good evening and welcome to the 21st meeting of fiscal 2023 of the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I would like to call the meeting to order and begin by introducing ourselves. If we'd like to begin with our members, Maggie.
Maggie Oldfield, member.
Sean.
Sean Fahey, member.
Cheryl.
Cheryl Tagaya, secretary.
And Rich, I believe, is going to be joining us in person, but shortly. So we'll introduce him when he comes. And now for our staff, Julia.
Julia Getman, clerk.
Josh.
Josh Eckertley, assistant town planner.
And Tim.
Community development.
And myself, Meredith Hall, serving as chair. Thank you. So to begin, we'll start with our administrative items. We have two sets of minutes to approve, February 23rd and March 16th. And has everybody been able to review the edits?
Yes.
Yep. And myself. Okay. With that, if I can entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 23rd and March 16th.
I'll make a motion to approve both minutes.
You might have to do them separately because I have to abstain from one because I wasn't at one of the meetings.
All right, no problem. A motion to approve the 23rd. Sean, you want to
Yes.
make that?
I will make a motion to approve the 23rd meeting minutes
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
Second, okay. And that would be Sean,
Yes.
Maggie,
Abstain.
Cheryl,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Great. And a second motion for March 16th minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 16th as amended.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Maggie,
Yep.
Sean,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you very much. The minutes are approved. And now we have a discussion of our next meeting dates. We do have currently a confirmed schedule for April 13th that we have on the agenda. And then that would be our next meeting. Is there any reason to move that meeting, Tim, or should we go for 2 weeks from that time?
We have a public hearing advertised for the 13th for the zoning recodification article.
Yes, I'm sorry. I meant the following meeting.
But that would be scheduled for the 27th. So that would be the first meeting with after the election. So I don't know if there's any reason to move it. That's after school vacation week.
Okay.
It'd be nice for any new members to dive right in. It'd be fun.
Great. So the next meeting, the next two meetings will be April 13th and April 27th. And now for our staff update, Tim?
Not too much. I'd like to, give you all an opportunity to jump right into the agenda. One thing I want to say is if you haven't already gotten me your written evaluations for the East Milton RFP, if you can get those in, just so we can have those on file. Just the complete file. We've been working with MAPC trying to hammer out a contract. That's been going well. So we should be able to have a vote from the select board on next Tuesday. Yeah, next Tuesday, the 4th, and be able to get MAPC under contract and really get moving on scheduling a kickoff meeting. So that may be something where Meredith, you and I may want to talk offline as we set the agenda for the 13th. Figure out, when to have it.
Okay.
We should have them under contract next week, so we can.
Great.
The other just really quick thing I just wanted to mention in case we sent out a lot of emails. We got plans dropped off for the Lower Guile Field reconstruction project. That's in front of the Concom, or it will be in front of the Concom. The applicant was required to drop off with the planning board, so I just sent those along. So those should be in your inbox if you're interested in looking at them. Planning board's not required to do anything with this stuff. It's just more of an FYI, but I just wanted to put it on your radar that those should be in your inbox. And that's it for now.
Okay. And just any update on the mapping for util and the MBTA zoning? Just a rough idea of when they're going to be finished?
So we talked we talked last week about some of the some dimensional tweaks and then some map tweaks that we want to do in terms of adjusting districts, adding districts, testing new districts. So I corresponded with UTL this week. I haven't heard back. I'm hoping they're just kind of doing the work on some of the dimensional kind of things that we talked about. I think one thing that will be helpful is kind of turning up the dial a little bit on that Granite Ave district, which was only tested for 2.5 stories. I think that's an area that could probably support a little bit more density, given its size and proximity to the highway. That's something that, again, because our contract with UTL has, pretty strict kind of guardrails in terms of how many iterations of a compliance model they do. Those dimensional tweaks, like I said last week, are really just a matter of, typing in new information into a spreadsheet. It's the districts and the changing the borders of the districts that is kind of labor intensive and starts to eat into that scope. What I did was I asked UTL to kind of test some of the dimensional stuff on the districts we already have. And then what we'll be doing is availing ourselves of some technical assistance resources from MAPC to test some of those new districts. So it's really, I'm in a position of trying to juggle technical assistance resources and make sure that we're taking advantage of everything and not eating into our scope with too many different actors. But that's something where as soon as I get kind of a product back from UTL, I can get that over to MAPC and kind of talk through, we wanted to test the paper site, we wanted to test the WER, we wanted to tweak the lines around Milton Village. We can have them do all of that. And the turnaround on that should hopefully be a matter of, we particularly not, So that's still something that is yet to come. So we can put a quick agenda item for the next meeting just to sort of have a touch point on this. And I can report back. And if you have any other kind of ideas about districts that you want to test, feel free to send those over to me. We're asking them to do the work, so we might as well kind of front load it. And then, like I said last week, we can pare back all of those districts and adjust the borders, in the future. Information now, would be good. So that's where we're at on that.
And Cheryl had a question, with respect to that.
Yes, with respect to that. UTIL's contract, I think, was for $20,000 grant funding, right? And I guess I have to go back and look at the scope of work again. It's not in the folder for tonight's meeting. But I guess I was thinking that we are expecting more from them than one iteration, and really no process with the planning board. I recall that there was going to be process with us. So can we go back and look at that scope and talk about that next week? Can you recirculate the scope, Tim?
You're muted, Tim. Sorry.
A lot of the other tasks were relative to kind of producing, products as we get more towards a kind of a final consensus around where these districts are going to be and kind of how they're going to be shaped. And you can take a look and interpret it how you want. I mean, the other thing that I'll say, if there's process, my recollection of that scope of work was really kind of more, desktop producing materials for us. I don't know if they're on the hook for actual either attendance at public meetings or kind of interface with the planning board. If they are, that's fine. We can get them in here. That wasn't my recollection. That wasn't how I was, working look at that contract. We can take another look and see. I mean, the other thing that I'm trying to, and if I'm not being clear, I apologize. You know, the model is a lot of work that we're not right now capable of doing in-house. And so I am trying to take advantage of as many resources as possible. So we have a contract with UTIL that kind of, you know, goes through the end of the year. The technical assistance for MAPC runs out in the fall. So that's available to us. I want to use it and really kind of treat UTIL as kind of the finisher. That's kind of how I was thinking about how to operate this, but you know, because you know we'll lose the ability to use MAPC staff for this sort of stuff, you know, by the fall. So I was thinking while we're still kind of throwing things up against the wall, you know, use the resources that they have, and again have UTIL kind of you know back clean up effectively. You know, once we have a better idea of what the district should be.
So I guess I would request, and not just for us, but for the public, some kind of mapping by you that says, and not really a map, but sort of an outline saying, here's the task, you know, and you know, you expect that it's going to be UTIL, perhaps it does this task and it'll be ready by X date, and maybe MAPC does this task and it'll be ready by that date, and they're codependent, or one's dependent upon the other, because we have a short period of time, as we all know, and I feel as if it's not clear to me how this is sort of mapped out to get done. And I know we've talked about the 2 scope of works and the contract, but you know, we had very little discussion about district boundaries or district criteria or dimensional criteria, and now we're getting to a point where UTIL is going to finish this piece of the work, and I feel like we barely discussed it. So anyway, I would like to have a more robust discussion about that at our next meeting.
Yep. Tim, we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting, and just so
I mean, I'm happy to talk about this stuff every meeting. You know, so I'll do my best to put together. You know, you know, Cheryl, you're absolutely right. We don't have a lot of time. There is a huge element of, you know, we're putting the plane together while we're flying. You know, I'm going to do my best to sort of map this out, but like new resources and new opportunities are coming up kind of all the time, and so. I'll see what I can do to bring that together. And again, you know, it's about getting it on the agenda and kind of making the time to have that robust discussion. So,
well, I would just add one last thing, is that there's a lot of public interest in this, and there's a lot of, I guess, uncertainty about what's happening. And the more we can talk about it at our meetings, the more the public can hear that discussion. So I would like to see it on every agenda. And if we can kind of map something out, at least gives people an idea of what the process is going to look like over the next 9 months.
Great. Okay. Anything else, Tim? Okay. Then we can now move to our citizen speak. If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak on Zoom on anything that's not related to the what's on the agenda, there will be time provided for what is on the agenda for folks to speak. Are we seeing any hands in the audience? No. Thank you. With that, I would like to reopen our scenic road permit, the public hearing for 1200 Brush Hill Road, and welcome in Ned Corcoran.
Hello, can you hear me?
Barely.
If you could speak up a little louder.
Okay, how's that?
That's much better.
Okay, I think maybe it was the transition from unmute to mute. Thank you. I did email the chair and Tim earlier today requesting a further continuance. I know it's sort of a pain to keep pushing this along, but I would ask if we could continue this to April 27th, if that's going to be the second night in April, and I'll then to be ready to close this out and move on.
Terrific. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing for the scenic road permit for 1200 Brush Hill Road to April 27th at 7:05.
Great. Is there a second?
A second.
Second, okay. All in favor? Maggie?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. We'll see you on the 27th.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And so we now can move to reopen 440, the public hearing on 440 Granite Avenue, site plan approval, continued from February 23rd. And welcome.
Is Rich here?
He's coming, I understand, but I haven't heard anything further.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, good. Good to see you.
And it's helpful to us that the other hearing was continued, so
Yeah.
we appreciate that. So we're here tonight. It's been about a month since our last meeting, and the subject of tonight's hearing is pretty much all updates and changes, but especially design, because we didn't talk about that in February. And there have been some fairly interesting design changes that have been made in the project. You've received, before I do that, I'll just introduce Michael Moore, who's sitting on my left, Tony Shao from Feingold Alexander. He's the architect who will explain the design changes to you tonight. Ellen Anzalone's in the audience, as is Pat Costello. So they're both the developers. And I'm Mary McKettrick, and I represent the applicant. So anyway, I'm not going to give an introduction. I did send you a memo listing the changes as of last Friday. And then since then, I sent you a few updated documents, and they seem confusing to get all of these, but they had to be updated. For example, the civil plan had to be updated because we've changed the parking design. And I did some updates as well to the parking demand management plan, which the Board of Appeals has requested. I gave you the edited copy so you could see comments from one member of the Board of Appeals. And I don't know whether you had a chance to review that, but you should look through it because it's a new concept for me. And I sort of looked at other decisions we've had in Milton, but I looked also online at what this was supposed to be about. And I think it's a very interesting idea. It's difficult to come up with concrete requirements, but that's what we've tried to do. And you can see that a couple were added by the member of the Board of Appeals. So when you have time, if you could look at that too. Last time we talked about engineering, stormwater, management, traffic, and I did want to tell you, I think you've received an email from the town engineer as to the previous meeting that there was an error in her original letter, that our plan has done what it was supposed to, so that as of this February, we were up to date. And I think we've sent a message to her asking her whether she sees anything in the new changes that might require her attention. So, but I haven't heard anything to date about that. So tonight we're going to talk about the site plan. This is a March 30th, 2023 site plan. You did receive a lot of pages, but the important pages are the ones where we've made changes. So that's what Tony's going to talk about. If that's okay, we'll just
Absolutely.
proceed with that.
Yeah.
So we need to share screens for this. I think Tim is getting ready.
Tim?
Marion, I've got your presentation. I can run that if you just tell me when to advance the slides.
I can do that.
Yes, we will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very strange looking at myself.
It is.
I'm going to try to talk to the screen.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you just need to.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here again tonight in front of you all on the next last day of March. So I think we're going to run through really what the substantive changes are. I know many of you are quite familiar with this project already, so I'm going to just go right at it. And the main thing that we're going to discuss tonight are probably on several fronts. One is going to be the design and material of the exterior. I think that's a pretty substantive change. And the other big change is the parking situation. So I think with that, let's just move right into the next slide.
Sorry, everybody. I'll figure this out.
Okay.
Just gonna have to do this old school style. Sorry.
That's fine, Sam, that's fine. And I know that you folks, I believe, have the hard copies in front of you as well.
Yes.
In case you can't read this. I'm going to just summarize the key things that this summary chart really puts together. So on the left-hand column, this is, again, the program for the project. So the parcel is the 20,212 square feet. We have total residential and retail support, gross square feet of 46,253. Parking, which I'll explain in a minute, is 15,873. And the total project size, gross square foot, is 62,126 square feet. The height of the project is 53 feet 2 inches. And then the residential mix is 24 units, of which 22 are 2 bedrooms and 2 are 1 bedrooms. And of those 24, 2 are affordable, 1 bedroom, 1 2 bedroom. And the commercial that we're going to show you tonight, there are 3 commercial spaces on the ground level, which total 3,983 square feet. With respect to the parking update, we've revised the design, but this is the facts. So we now have, instead of the automated parking system, we have the conventional parking garage. So in the lower level garage, we have 19 spaces in what we call the basement, in that lower level. And then on the main level, we have 10 ground level spaces which are dedicated for the residents. There are additional 4 spaces which are commercial and visitor parking spaces, 2 handicap spaces, a total of between the basement and ground level, 35 interior parking spaces. And we add all those numbers up. Outside, we have an additional 5 commercial spaces off Mechanic Street, which are available from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the commercial use, and then for visitors, and then available off hours from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning for visitors and or residential use off Mechanic when commercial is not using it during the day. Therefore, the total count when combining the parking on the interior spaces plus those 5 outdoor spaces is 40. And when you break down the percentage of the relationship to parking to unit, so the dedicated parking spaces for the residents during the day is 31 spaces for 24 units at a 1.29 ratio of parking to units. And then when you take the switch into the evening when they're not being used by commercial tenants, it can increase the count to 40 parking spaces. Therefore, for those 24 units, the ratio moves up to 1.67 parking to unit ratio. In addition to that, as we've described before, we have 3 proposed loading pickup spaces, drop-off spaces with direct access to the building off of Granite Avenue, and then the bike storage in the basement totals 48 bike storage spaces. So there's no questions on this. I'm going to just proceed to the design.
Great.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yeah, next down. I think we've shown this before. This is what the existing site is. What is proposed in red is what's going to be demolished, and the total extent of the site is outlined in yellow. Next. This is the site plan. I'm going to get more into the weeds really on the next drawing because this is just showing the context of the building in relation to the site. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to just explain now what is happening here primarily as the changes. So the biggest change, as I mentioned, is that we have a more conventional garage. So coming off Mechanic Street on the ground level, garage pretty much enters where we showed it before, but we are not doing the automated system. This is a conventional surface parking at grade, which allows for a total of 16 spaces. So there are, again, 10 spaces here for the units, 2 handicap spaces here, one which also could be used as a van. We have 4 spaces here, which during the day would be available for the commercial owners of the retail tenants in the front. And then in addition, they could also become overflow visitor parking spaces when the commercial is not using it after hours. So that totals in this ground level here, 16 spaces in this first floor. Then in addition to that, off Mechanic Street on the grade is 5 surface spaces here, which are also dedicated for commercial and / visitor parking. So again, 16 here, 5 here. And the other big change that we're going to explain in a minute is that we created essentially another access route for a ramp here, down to the basement garage below, which is shown at the edge here, and it's dropping down into the garage underneath. The other main change that I think the last time that we had met with you was a strong desire to really activate Granite Avenue with retail use. So the entire frontage here, with the exception of the residential lobby, is retail now. So they're showing us 3 retail tenants here. It's the number that I mentioned before. It's over 36 or 3,700 square feet. Residential lobby is here. Again, we still show the surface parking spaces here. These are the 3 proposed loading, pickup, drop-off, and delivery here, which is sort of hash marked the front. This is what we've seen before. So I think that is really the major change that we're showing in this plan. And if there's any questions, I can move on. Okay, next. So therefore, now when we come down that ramp off Mechanic Street here, down to the lower basement level, we show a total of 19 parking spaces here. This is all dedicated for the residential use. So it's conventional parking garage underneath, and then we have the additional bike storage here, unit storage here. So this is, again, a major change in the design overall for the project. Any questions on that? Okay, thanks. I'm just going to go fairly quickly through the plan unit layouts. It's very similar to what you've seen before. So on the second floor here, we essentially have 8 2-bedroom units, one bedroom unit. This unit here is designated as the affordable unit, which is the one bedroom unit. Next. On level 3, a very similar plan as level 2, but now this unit is designated as an affordable unit, which is a 2-bedroom unit. Next. And then level 4, we have essentially just 6 2-bedroom units. Again, at the top level is set back from the edge by these continuous decks that you see outlined in the edge here and here. Next. The roof plan is, again, quite similar to what we've shown you before. The central area here, this is the screened-in mechanical, which also deals with the elevator stair overrun. And we have proposed to create, solar PVs. We still want to create a very sustainable project in the overall design, so that is the intent as shown here, to try to maximize the extent we can for solar. Next. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly the elevations are black and white, but we have some colored elevations. I think it's more useful. So, but just the key things to point out, the 53 feet 2 inch height is to the top of the roof of the 4th floor. That does not include the mechanical penthouse, which is additional 8 feet above that. The main body of the building at 3 stories is 41 feet 2 inches. That is the governing numbers that sort of drive through the whole design. Next. And the same thing's on operating on basically the north and northwest, which is mostly Mechanic Street. So let's just go to the next, which is getting into some of the color elevations. Okay, so this is the elevation now shown along Granite Avenue here. This is like a section cut through the highway. But here you can see the design as it relates to the overall street context. Ground floor retail occupying the entire level, which you can see mostly glazed. This is the residential component here. The 4th floor does set back at the edges here and here. And we still have the idea of these notches which carve in here and here to break up the overall mass in relation to the overall form. But the biggest change, of course, what you're seeing here is color and material. We've really moved it to essentially a red brick approach. We'll get into more of the details, but we heard comments and we reacted. So I think we have moved it away from the previous iteration, which is more grayish color. So we're really proposing a red brick. And we have actually some samples here, which we can certainly share or pass around if you like. Next. The other elevation that was asked for that we hadn't shown before, which is essentially the west elevation. This is the view from the bank, looking here. So again, Granite Avenue is here on the right, and this is a straight-on elevational view. So here you can see essentially the edge here. This is where the brick turns on the corner, and then it goes to the plank system here, which is more rendered sort of almost clapboard style from here back. The ground floor also, we've changed, so we've also introduced more brick at the base here. This is essentially, this is the retail component from here to here, which is why it's glass. And from here to here, because this is the garage, it's essentially, we'll say a blank wall with just an egress area here for storage and receiving. And the scale of it steps down as it moves back towards Mechanic Street, and there's going to be some planting and screening which we'll talk about as well. But here again, you can see the overall design that changes from brick to siding, and then there's various introduction of other materials in the overall palette, which again I'll explain in a minute. Next.
So I need to take a pause real quick and let Rich in. He needs to be promoted. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt in the middle of what you were saying, so
Good time
hopefully
to
he'll
take a drink too.
pop in now. And you can,
Tell me when I can resume.
I'm in.
Hello.
Welcome,
Thank
Rich.
you.
Welcome. Okay, I'm going to resume. Okay, so the other elevation here, this is the northeast elevation. This is essentially the Mechanic Street elevation. So what you see here again is that from here to here, again, the scale of the buildings, again, angling back, that's why it's sort of lighter shaded. So the more heavy part, this is a direct frontal view on the elevation. So here again, you can see the brick wraps around the base. This is the lower level here, which basically creates the access and steps down, as we know. This is 10 feet and then jumps to like 20 feet here. And then the rest of the building mass produces here. Again, the fourth floor is set back along the edge and along the entire perimeter, and then the mechanicals at the top. And again, you can see how the two ends sort of wrap around the base where the brick carries from the side. So we're trying to introduce more of the brick in the base of this as well. Next. So again, this is the before view from Granite Ave in the corner. Next. And here's the proposed redesign. So I think the important thing to point out, besides the coloration shift, there's a couple of other things we made adjustment to. So we also took more of the brick and we wrapped it to the corner. Previously, this panel, we're actually introducing more brick to basically make the mass feel more substantive rather than just simply a facade. And then we have the introduction of the notches here, which is a panel system in between to break the scale. The ground floor retail is largely glass to try to create as much transparency along the street. Here you can see where it transitions to the panelized system on the side. That lighter gray color is where the brick turns in the corner. And then you can see at the bottom, the brick also picks up here at the bottom and then wraps around the back on that elevation that I previously showed. So again, this is a major change in materials and color shift. And again, I'll get into some of the details that surround the window frames as well. Next. So again, existing view from Mechanic Street. Next. So the revised design. So again, the substantive change. You can see the brick pulling around the base. This is again with the access. There's the 5 parking spaces on grade, and then garage access ramp is behind these planting to screen it, to bring it down to the lower level. And then the upper form again is largely more of the clapboard-looking siding with some various material palettes that's shifting and moving to create some detail and interest. So again, it's the major change in materiality here. Next. This is more of an angle view of the Southeast Expressway, just looking at the corner. But again, the important thing to note is that it's just as the same as this corner, the brick is wrapping around this side. So again, the intent is to wrap the brick on the corners as well as some sod in order to engender more of a sense of volume. And again, you can see the retail just really occupies the ground floor level as previously shown. Next. Again, the same watercolor sketch I did before. This is still showing the idea on the residential lobby. There will be some material change that occurs only at the residential lobby. The rest of it is going to be mostly glass for the storefront on the retail component.
Tony, is that a limestone look, or what is
I
that?
think we're still looking like some kind of panelized system. We're still determining that. I mean,
Okay,
we
yeah.
have granite base
Yeah.
that runs along the continuous edge as we previously shown, but we're still looking at that Meredith as far as what the material for the residential, but we're open to certain suggestions.
Thank you.
Next. And then this again is the corner view at the intersection of Mechanic Street and Granite Ave. Again, the retail wraps around the corner here. Again, you can see the brick here, and then transitions from here to here to the siding on the edge. Next. So there's a lot of dense information here, but I think it's somewhat important in terms of the material. So the big bulk of it is that the brick that's proposed is here. We're looking at kind of a Norman brick. It's a longer brick. It's conventionally more like 3 by 12 inches instead of 8 inches. So we want to create a little bit more special size brick that's going to be dominating the whole brick facade. The infill panel that breaks here, this is a kind of fiber cement. We have some samples. Again, we're still tweaking the color because we literally can create any color we want, but we believe it needs to be in the same family that relates to the brick, so it's in the reddish terracotta range. Here you can see the granite, which is in the base. And then as we get to some of the other finer grain detail, so in the elevations too, we have some special brick that is breaking the scale down in the window pattern. So that brick is introducing this sort of coursing, alternating recessed and pulling forward brick. So it's like creating some detail. And so it's not just all the same brick, but we're actually introducing more detail. And then in addition to that, there's also some other details, such as we have the fiber cement panel here. We also have a darker gray sort of palette, which is creating a sort of a lintel above the windows on the rear facade here. And then we're also introducing into the vertical breaks other sort of light brown terracotta as well. So we're introducing that terracotta color even in the rear, not just on the base, but also into the window pattern. So there's more threading of the material tying from the front to the back. And then the windows and then the banding here, we believe is going to be essentially very dark gray. We think that tends to be very elegant. It tends to also disappear more. And the sign band here, which is to be determined based on whatever retail tenant goes in there, will be creating a nice area for the signage for the retail tenants here. So this essentially comprises the bulk of the details and the palette that gets into the facades. And again, we have some samples here we can show you directly. Next. And the other thing I think we want to point out, I think this was also brought up, so there's an opportunity as well, when we're dealing with the ground level, we're also introducing that kind of alternating brick pattern here at the base. So when people who walk by it, it's not just flat brick, but there's, again, detail and relief. And in addition to that, we talk a lot about the idea of potentially a historic neighborhood, an informational plaque, something that describes this neighborhood, this district, and the history behind it. So there's an opportunity to really create a kind of signage idea that's quite visible. It can be pretty large, depends on what material, what information we want to place on that plaque. But the idea is to really integrate it into the design of this facade. So as we move around the corner from the retail, there's a fairly large expanse of blank wall that we can basically tell the story of the neighborhood on this site. Okay, next. I think on the landscape plan, the only thing that I'm just going to stress a couple of things, again, because we've seen a lot of this. So the key thing is, again, on the access ramp going down to the garage, we still have the proposal for essentially vertical bushes to hide the screening of that edge. There is a wall here that relates to the ramp, of course, but we want to soften it, especially with respect to this neighbor over here. We, again, still have the idea that transformers underground. We also have the idea that there's certain utilities, light poles, all these other things. Sidewalk still is going to be an all-new sidewalk, granite curbing, brick edge, very much along the lines that you yourself have in the up the street in the town square. A special planter at the corner, also that not creates decorative, but also a little bit of safety at the corner. And again, we just have mostly trying to soften the edge that we can to the extent that we can along the perimeter. I think the other thing I'm going to point out, I think Cheryl, you raised this. So along this edge here, because this is a fairly amount of vehicles coming in here, we are going to create a special paving pattern here. So it's not just going to look like asphalt, but we want to actually make it look and feel something more special. So we want to make sure that whatever we do here, it isn't just extenuation of asphalt. So I think that was a really strong and good suggestion. So we are definitely incorporating that idea into this design from essentially this curb cut to this curb.
And I think it's required by the engineers. They asked that it was impervious.
Yeah, the pervious.
Pervious, that it was pervious, yeah. Yeah.
I think those are, and again, wherever we look at the historic marker, that can be subject to reviews with folks, but we have a lot of areas we could locate this historic marker in a number of places along the edge. Next. And just very quickly again, we have green roofs still proposed on the top of this area that screens the parking below. Next. And again, we want to create, a range of decorative planting, the green roof, which is sedum. This is the arborvitae shrub that screens the ramp down. Trying to create some decorative planting to the greatest extent we can. Again, all these subject to reviews, but the idea is to really try to create as attractive, to the extent that we can, landscape feature elements around the site and around the perimeter, around the base. So these were things that were proposed initially and still are proposed in current design. Next. One more. And then here you can see a close-up view of that area around the bench. So this is the arborvitae hedge, and that basically tries to screen against the parking area here. And green roof as well. I think that reaches the end. One more, let's just see. Go one more, yeah. So I think we can leave all this here. This is a shadow study you previously shown. Happy to go into that, but it didn't change from before. And then at the very end, it's all the lighting and light pollution analysis of the site. So again, we have all that information here if you wish to get into that, but I figure the main thing we want to talk about is really the design. So I'll stop it here if we want to just back up one slide, Tim, or whatever slide you folks wish to refer to. I think that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much. That's great. Were there any questions that were not answered that the board would have? And then we can go to comments. Well, they're waiting. Was there, because the lighting on the building is very interesting. Is it underlit? What is the, I didn't see anything unless I missed a detailed, anything on the lighting, the exterior first floor lighting.
There's no freestanding lighting. All
Right.
the lighting is, the lighting on the exterior and the upper floors is
Right.
the minimum that's required for safety.
Right.
And it will be off when residents are not using those areas or, we don't need them otherwise. And those are attached to the building, and the technical specifications suggested, it's as usual, it would be, this type of lighting, I think, they are in these plans. We just didn't go through each page with you. In the garage, again, the lighting, there's no exterior side lighting, for example, in the garage. So there's no lighting outside the garage that would point towards the neighbor's house.
Right.
There's lighting, roof lighting inside the garage, and it's really going to be inside now because of this design. It's really not going to shine out at all. Before, there was an open area, and we had to be careful that it wasn't casting light onto the neighbor's property, but we had to also make sure that there was enough light so that it would be safe under the green roof for that part of the garage. So now it's all inside lighting. I don't know that we have specifications in our plans right now for the lighting inside the new garage in the basement.
Yeah.
If the planning board needs that, I'm sure that it can be provided, but it would probably be standard, whatever. It's not going to show outside the building. We don't, I don't know what we have in the front. I mean, I think
Under the
again-
cantilever, it looks like there's lighting, and I'm just curious how that's,
Yes.
If you want to back up.
are those
Tim, to,
spots underneath there? I just
Yes,
didn't
and
know
that,
it
the
was.
idea of those is minimum necessary for brightness would be,
Right.
again, all of the restrictions. It's not supposed to be cast on neighbor's property, but it's also supposed to be enough to provide safety so
Right.
that at night it's completely different from the way it is now. So it's just a dark corner now with small buildings. When this building is constructed, you have this cantilever, you have little lights underneath it.
I guess that's what I'm asking. What are those? Are they recessed lighting, or what are?
They're recessed in the roof.
Eliminates the underside of the over.
Tim,
Right.
it's
That's
slide
what.
22
So like
if
a
you wanna go
spots
back.
periodically,
Exactly, but-
or is it a?
It'll be, the idea is it's continuous strip, and that'll be on timer. It'll go off at a certain hour, so it's not on all night.
Okay. Okay. And that will be visible. You'll see the.
You won't see
It's in the
the
ceiling.
lighting element, you'll just see it glow.
Okay. That's what it looked like in the paper. That's why I was.
Yeah.
That's how it's written.
Didn't want to just make assumptions. Okay. That's good. Okay.
And as far as exterior lighting, if we showed front lighting in the previous plans, it's still there. But I don't know that it's any particular design, like lighting by the front door. I don't think we provided a specification for the type of light. And the design has been changed a little bit, so I think it's something that, the developer needs to look at and design appropriately for what it has now.
I mean, I believe there are street lamps, that's part of.
Right. The sidewalk.
That's required anyways, that the city's going to be doing anyway.
I mean, streetlights.
Streetlights.
Yeah, which is actually, that was my second question. We had talked way back, and this is, again, we've been here for a little while discussing this, that we talked about putting the wires underground, utilities, and maybe doing like a street pole versus just, more of a lamp post look rather than, You know, like similar to what's on Central Avenue,
Right.
36 Central, or Elliott Street now. I don't know if that's anything that, we talked about the utilities going under, so I guess I don't want to make an assumption that that lighting will be done, but it has been done on other projects, and it would be an opportunity to enhance the streetscape here.
Yeah, we'd love to do it. And we do have a work order with Eversource to the tune of about $500,000 to put those streetlights underground. And we're going to pursue that once we can move this project forward.
Okay.
To get a grant to do that. I've talked to Congressman Lynch about this, and he thinks there's opportunity there to do that. But
Because it would
we
greatly,
haven't
yeah,
moved on that in a while because obviously we've
Right.
been in a holding pattern here.
right,
They said
understandably.
it was a grant.
Yes, that was
It's a Mass
a
Works grant.
That was a Mass Works grant, and Elliott Street.
District improvement grant, but federal funding isn't called.
And Adams Street over down to the, in the village.
We're going to pursue it for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, for 200 feet, 5 or 6 decorative lamps would be really nice. I'm
Yeah.
sure we could do that, but
Yeah.
You don't have them throughout East Milton Square right now, right? You just have regular streetlights.
They're just where the deck, when the deck
see,
project,
yes. Yeah.
yes, so when the deck project,
Right.
it was all part of, it was actually a previous deck project initiated, first did the historic lighting in there, and then they replicated and did some additional, slightly different lighting when they redid the actual deck itself.
Yeah, and I think they're less bright and there are fewer of them. Because
Yeah, they're LED, yeah, they're,
I mean, they're LED now, but they're not as many fixtures. There were double fixtures before.
Right,
And you
exactly.
ended up turning off half of them. 'cause
yep,
it's so bright.
it was very bright, yep, exactly. The things we've learned. Sorry,
Oh,
go
that's
ahead.
right. Yeah,
Go ahead.
Marion, with respect to that component, if the grant isn't provided, will the utility poles remain?
yes.
I think so,
I mean-
yeah. It's an enormous
4-story
additional
building
cost,
now.
and now the building's smaller than it was before. But what we said before to the planning board was, and at that time we were exploring the cost, if we can do it financially, we will do it. And I think the same issue applies, but here where there may be opportunities for grant funding, I think I can say to you that we're going to still try to do it, but we're going to try to find an additional source of funding.
We're definitely going to pursue it strongly. I mean, it's in our interest, especially for all those units across
Yeah.
the front. We're going to have a sidewalk exposed. I mean, on Central Ave, the conduits, when we built Central Ave, the conduits for that street lighting were in the ground. We had to shore them up. And last year, they put them in there. So,
Finally.
I mean, I would imagine that if we're going to expose this sidewalk, that
Right.
we'll put the conduits in to put this underground.
Right.
Whether it happens or whether we can get the funding to do it, I don't, we can't commit to that, but we're definitely going to, it's in our interest and we're definitely going to pursue it.
I think it would be a great time to do it, and that it could be continued along Granite Ave if you were able to do further improvement going up to the square. So, I mean, it really is something to stay focused on and find a way to do, but I
Yeah.
can't pay for it myself, so I'm just,
Right.
just telling you where I'm looking at.
We did ask her.
Well, if I could, I like it that much. I think it makes a big difference.
It makes such a difference. Lighting is just absolutely,
So Michael, looking at slide 16, it would have to go underground before you cross Mechanic Street, right?
Yeah. But Eversource, we met Eversource out there with Chase from the town, with the lighting department. There's a plan and there's a cost, but we got to move this project to another phase to allow that to,
certainly.
for us to pursue that through Congressman Lynch and whoever else, whatever ways that we can.
What's the timing on that process? How long would it take for you to know whether or not you would have funding by grant to do that?
It'd probably be a phased effort. Get the conduit cabling underground, and then I don't know, to be honest. Like,
So the reason
the
I
fact
asked,
that the work order is done and there is actually a big part of it. The question would be, can the funding be secured? And
Depends on the source.
The reason I ask, it sounds like, and if I'm incorrect, tell me, that you put the underground infrastructure in place before you get a commitment that they'll relocate to underground?
Well, it would depend on the timing of our project moving forward. If we knew it was going to happen, we would do it. If there was a commitment to doing it, we would put the conduit in place, because obviously, building that foundation and doing it after the fact would be ridiculous.
And if you were to go forward, if you were to get a building permit in July, I'm just putting this out as an example, at what point would you be doing that conduit if you thought you were going to be able to use it? How long could you wait? When do you do that excavation in the street?
You would do it during construction.
Yeah, but you don't know exactly at what part of construction, right?
No, Eversource are their own.
So you'd have some flexibility as to when you could do it. That's what I'm asking you?
Yes.
Because I know with grant funding, there couldn't be different sources, and sometimes you don't follow, and then sometimes something becomes available. But you do anticipate, you already have talked a little bit about this.
Well, we have, but we had to back off because we were in a holding pattern for a while. But there's a will there to do it on our part, and Eversource have looked at it. Verizon own the poles, they've been involved, so there's a lot of groundwork has been done to do this.
Thank you.
Do you have a projected cost estimate for it?
For
putting the light poles in and
yeah, it's
putting
$500,000
Half-
from Eversource. Yeah.
$500,000. Okay.
A $500,000 eliminates the utility poles and puts all the cables underground. That's, I think you might be asking.
That's what I'm. Yes.
Yes.
Separately, what you had mentioned, Michael, about light poles
Oh yeah.
is a different number.
Yes, but 6 or 8 light poles, they're like $4,000 each.
Yeah.
something
That's
like
what.
that.
Okay.
That wouldn't be a deal breaker, doing that piece of it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Great.
As it stands now, the existing light poles, because we have a light study on it, it illuminates the sidewalk enough, so the additional poles aren't needed, but if it goes underground, they will be needed.
Yeah. Which would be the
Would be nice.
yeah to everyone's advantage, the towns.
The idea would be to do something that you'd want to continue and improve it bit by bit.
Exactly. Exactly.
Parts of the square.
Right.
But,
Right.
I do have a
Did you have
couple
a question?
questions.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You brought samples. Can we see the samples?
Sure.
And while he's getting them, I just want to say thank you for spending the time and the effort in changing the parking plan. I know that was probably a big thing to do, and I really appreciate that.
I didn't do it, but I was surprised that they were able to get it.
Yeah.
I really was.
Well, there is a cost to it, but I think what was the driving force was mechanical parking does work, and I do believe in it. And ironically, we had a meeting yesterday, the fire chief, and he was disappointed we were pulling it away. Just for the record. But conventional parking works better when you have transient people, and that was kind of why we felt that now that we have conventional parking, there's more adequate parking for visitors, there's more flexibility with the parking. So that was really why we switched. It's not that we don't believe in the mechanical parking system. That we do. And you'll see it in Milton someday.
Tim, if you want to pull up the material palette elevation, I don't remember what the drawing that was. I think it's 20-something. It shows the materials, what goes where.
What are you asking me for? I'm sorry.
So there's the elevation in the presentation that showed the materials that were next to the elevations. I don't have the order in front of me. 20. Keep going.
Page 14.
Yeah, I will keep going here. Here. Okay, thank you.
So Tony, before you get started, did you say this is modular brick, not thin brick?
No, it's not. It's full depth.
Full depth, okay.
And Norman brick is not a new brick, it's a historic brick that has kind of had a resurgence in the last 10 years.
Okay, I just wanted to confirmation that it was a standard depth versus thin.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So the brick, again, just to remind folks, is again a bulk of the building. So this is the examples. You know, there are a ton of bricks, but these are the ones that we zeroed in that we like the best so far. It is this kind of terracotta. I think it has some slight variation to it. I think there's some texturally, but we want it to be fairly quiet in the brick palette, and it has a rings of terracotta, browns, and other things. And this is a sample of its stack here. And then the other panel, which is literally called terracotta, that is the infill panel here, which is next to it. And it's also essentially these elements here along the window. And so those elements here and there, we're trying to be complementary between the red brick and that. So it's of the family, but it's actually slightly lighter because it's going to be a field of it, you know, that's very smooth versus the brick. So again, you can see there, even within the terracotta, there's quite a subtle variation. So a lot of this is, when you create a mock-up on site, then we'll see it, in person, like, well, how does this actually look? And then the same is true of the gray color that relates to both the siding and some of this. So we can literally have any color we want. So we just have to specify that color and then drive it into the fiber cement panel. But we are looking at a gray tone. I think something that is quite soft on the warmer side. It's not white, so it is a great hint. But we don't. It's going to fall again somewhere between where we're on site, but it's going to feel best against this material, this building, and to some extent the neighbors as well. We know that a lot of houses are essentially mostly white, all white.
A question for you, Tony. Is that an applied or is it sort of a baked-in kind of color finish? So is it painted or is it
On which? On the fiber?
on the fiber cement?
So it's high-density fibers with baked.
It's baked, okay.
So it doesn't
So for
need any
durability,
chips.
right.
It still has the same color.
Okay, great.
And then granite, which we don't have, but I think granite is the base around the building. I think these are the starting samples that we're starting to collect, but we did want to share with you at least our first pass of the ones we're tending towards liking.
And then, did I read that you were using black on the window frames?
Either black or dark gray. I think that's to be determined, but we do want the frames to be quite dark, whether it is actually black or a very dark gray. Again, that's another piece of refinement that we're still getting at. And the same is true, Cheryl, with regard to the sign band issue. Whatever the palette of the window muntins is, we want to be essentially the same. So if we're going to go dark gray, we want that to be dark gray. And that's going to be evident throughout all the window frames. So we think that the dark color is quite elegant, and it also tends to recede.
So, and you're comfortable with the height of the sign band, that the retailers will be happy with the amount of height to put their signs in?
I think so. We've given them sufficient area, real estate, that whatever storefront goes in there should be able to accommodate that. Of course, that'll be subject to further review. I know there's a whole signage issue itself on top of all of this, but I think we're creating a pretty decent sized band. I think it's at least 4 feet. I mean, it's
That's
generous.
a lot, yeah. And then, because there is that overhang, there's probably going to want to be lighting on those signs, but that again come with the signage package. But it's just something to think about. If you've got integral sign or lighting in that soffit, and then you're going to need to either have something for those signs because they're set back, right?
Yeah. I think it's a great point. I think to the degree that under soffit lighting contributes some lighting on the retail. But again, the retail generally is mostly during daytime operations. Of course, in the winter, it gets dark at 4, whatever it is nowadays. So there'll be a couple hours when you need it, but during the course of the regular daytime. But it will largely depend on what retail tenant is going in there, and of course, the review of the signs that's going to be approved.
I think during the construction phase, we will want it to be consistent.
Yeah.
But not because A goes into A. We'll want to take it to the sign. This is how it's going to look, and then when it's ABC or whatever goes into it, But I can see that we would be the ones that would take it to the sign committee or sign commission or whatever to have it approved. And
Okay.
have it consistent for the 3 units.
For assigned space.
But yeah,
I see that,
part
but
of
yeah,
the
yeah,
quality
that
granted
makes
for the
sense.
resident sign also, it needs to be
Consistent.
consistent.
And then
Very visual.
on the facade, I noticed you still have some vents. We talked about the vents. Has everybody driven down 93 and looked at the building under construction on Dorchester and seen beautiful facade materials plastered with vents all over the place? And I know you're not showing that many here, but the beautiful facade right there could be interrupted by those vents, right?
We are absolutely studying that.
I mean, on the top floor, we'll go to the roof. We have solar up there, so we have to be conscious of that. But we're very conscious of it. We will have a minimal venting on granite, and if it is, it'll be consistent and match the color of, basically blended into the material that's there.
And this is just for, it's all electric still.
Yes.
This is just for dryers.
Kitchen exhaust also. and
Kitchen
bathroom
exhaust.
That's what it is.
Okay.
It will not look like the building on the Express.
Yeah, that's,
Have you looked at those heat pump washer and dryer units that are ventless?
Yes, and the feedback is not good.
I know, I've studied those a lot for one of my relatives. They're really interesting, they sound great, but there's some pretty bad reviews of them. So that maybe, what would you do if you didn't need a vent in the future? You just cover it over, right? I mean, we've talked about this, how
Yeah, I mean,
to have none
yeah.
minimized, so that absolutely we hear that concern, and we don't want the building.
Yeah, I mean, the plans are not developed for the detailed layout of the unit, so we don't know where those are going to end up, because it's very specific to where the equipment is inside, especially on the washer dryer. So it's going to take some diligence on your part in the future, past this process, to make sure that you take into account what we're talking about, right?
The top floor will go to the roof, and the second and third floor
No, it's
are
not
the
the
same.
same.
So
So
that will
it's
help,
Okay,
whatever it is, at least it'll be
consistent.
consistent, okay.
The two end units, you have an opportunity to go
to the end.
to the
Go
ends.
in.
And so really you have 3 units that you have no choice,
Right.
if you don't go vertical,
Right.
but to come out directly.
Yeah, we're very conscious how visual the facade on Granite Ave is, and how many people will see it on a daily basis.
I mean, sometimes you're driving pretty slow on 93, but that facade still under construction is so obvious, right? I mean, and you're not even up close to it. All right, last time we talked about your deduct alternate for PVC window. And you were, I think, going to look into that and get back to us with a little more information about what those look like. And I don't know if you had a chance to think about that further, or give us the name of a manufacturer or a product or something.
We're looking at Artisan windows. They're based in Quincy, actually, just down the street. But
You could get a sample? A sample?
Yeah.
Okay, of that.
They
You
actually have
could-
a fantastic showroom, right beside Brick and Beam, just on the corner.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you could leave one in Tim's office. In Julie's office.
Window?
Tim's office.
They usually do a
Julie
corner.
doesn't want to be tripping over it in Tim's office.
Yeah, or a section through one.
They usually have they usually will make a corner, or at least a lot of manufacturers have a corner.
Just don't put it near Julia's seat. So.
We'll probably have a couple of-
The shingles. And we didn't know they were there, unfortunately.
Okay.
The windows on Granite Ave will probably be somewhat different. They'll be triple glazed, they're non-operable, and then the windows towards the rear and sides will be, may not be of that specification, but we're very conscious of the noise in Granite Ave.
So then, one more sort of facade-related question. It's really a section question. I think your heights before at your first floor needed a higher height for the stacker. And you've got 16 feet, 8 inches floor to floor for the first floor. I mean, oftentimes I think that can be like 14. I was just looking at your total height, because if it's 11, let's say it's 11 feet floor to floor for your residential floors, but you've got more height built into that. I'm just curious if you have given that a lot more thought since you changed the stacker.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Cheryl. I think we're holding the height, I think in part, to some extent also, I think for the retail commercial tenants. I think there's a desire to have, pretty generous height in there, whoever goes in there. And I think it also somehow makes the building, I think, a bit more elegant. I think we're concerned that we don't want to quash things, because already knocking a story off is a substantive change in proportion. So yes, at the moment, I think we're still holding that floor to floor that we previously carried for the stacker system. Can that be studied further and refined?
I think to your point, Tony, we did look at it briefly and felt as though that we need the height so it will not feel
Too squat.
too squat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Too heavy.
Can I go back to the windows for a minute? With respect to the windows, they're not divided light windows, right? They're full glass light. Is that right?
Yeah.
All the windows on all sides?
Yes.
Yes.
What does that mean? I'm just curious.
Well,
You mean like two panes?
You heard of Milton and
yeah.
Yeah, Milton is in between. Is there?
Probably have
Yeah.
divided light in your home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of Milton has stuff.
Yeah, I think the window expression is a little more contemporary. There are larger things of glass for these units for the most part.
Yeah, did you look at which stretch code what you might achieve here? Because the window, any kind of a division in the divided light reduces the energy efficiency of the window, right? So I don't know what you're looking at for a U value for these windows, but I imagine if you operable sections reduce the energy efficiency of them. So are you using, I don't know that we saw on here how many are operable, but anyway, that's my comment about mullions in terms of this kind of a window.
By operable, would you mean open them? You can open them?
Yeah.
So should we have to look at the whole new code in relation to?
So right now you're just looking at the operable section being like an awning or at the bottom section, right? That small section?
Right, smaller piece.
Yeah, okay.
The new code will most likely push us into a triple glaze system.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't fully studied it. We have
Yeah.
solar, we have other components, and we're working with a HERS radar, so and obviously with Commissioner Ballard.
Okay, and then, may I?
Yeah, keep going.
Another, okay.
Want to see if Rich had anything after you, but
Yeah, this was really not on the design, but on the affordability. So I was looking at, it says 24 units and 2 affordable units puts us at 8.3%, right? And so I think, Mary, in your memo, you mentioned doing a contribution. But this is you're proposing 80% AMI? Because I was wondering whether...
Well, the usuals.
Yeah,
whatever
which is
it
80.
is.
Yeah, and it's if you look at what 80% AMI is these days, it's a pretty high income, actually, higher than what many people might think. I think the latest standards, I was looking them up. And so like a 80% AMI in our area for one person is a salary of $78,000 or income of $78,300. So I was just thinking maybe rather than a contribution, you drop down from an 80% to something lower, like a 60% or even a 50%, so we can get a little bit more affordability. All the 40Bs that are proposed are all at 80% AMI, so we don't really have anything that's dropping us a little bit lower. So that was one thought. And maybe conversation with the Affordable Housing Trust on what their thought about that is
Well, it's
would be
interesting to have
helpful.
an alternative. I'm cautious about dropping too low because these are condominium units and they have to be purchased.
Yeah.
I have seen projects that were where the town required, one of them was on the Cape, it was a very small project too, about 15 units. They required, like 30, whatever the lowest is.
Yeah.
They really couldn't get buyers because people couldn't get mortgages.
Yeah.
So, but 60% is a lot different. And as an alternative, I haven't really looked at that, but I don't see any reason, what do you think? I don't
No,
know. What
yeah,
reason
no
why
problem.
we would not explore that as an alternative to a payment? And the payment's always difficult to calculate.
Yeah, it's just a thought. Again, maybe the Affordable Housing Trust would have some thought about that.
Meet with them
Yeah,
Once we got past this.
right.
Yeah.
So just something I wanted to throw out there.
Interesting idea.
I did see that in the news. Massachusetts has the highest GDP in the nation. The average salary, I mean, you know that this state is pretty unique, but I thought for sure like New York, California, but Massachusetts is the highest now in the country.
We also have affordability problems, so I think 80% AMI, like in Boston, where I'm sure Feingold Alexander is doing work too. They're looking at that, not just automatically just going to 80% AMI, right? Looking at some at 100%, some at 80%, some at 60, 70 a lot, right? So it's just something I think it's worth considering. So those are my comments for now.
Good. John? Yep.
The slide 13. If you could go to 13, Tim, please. Tim might not have heard us.
Tim, can you move to
Tim's
slide
taking a
13?
nap.
Is it not the one that we're looking at? It's a different one.
No.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's a different one.
right, we'll
It's-
check back
it's-
with-
It's the one that is
Direct on, yeah.
From the
directly
bank.
across
Yeah.
the expressway. And I guess my question, yeah, it's similar to this. It's a little bit more dramatic.
Yeah, it's more of what your actual, yeah.
Yes.
All right, Tim, I don't know if you can hear us, Chris, as we're going to slide 13.
449.
I'll
Which
continue
slide
with
do we
my
need?
question, Marion, while Tim gets us there.
What slide?
13, the change in the color creates
there.
even a greater contrast now to the mechanical equipment on the roof. And, this slide probably is where it's most noticeable.
You mean the screening?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what that is.
Yeah.
yeah. Is the mechanical equipment screened?
Yes, that's what that is.
That's what that
And
is.
is,
Part of the plan is, because the planning board always asks for it, so we included it, but is that the mechanical equipment will have, is higher than the equipment, there will be a screen around it, which is the reason that counts in the height, because it has the screen. So
That could
are
be
you
the
asking
same
for a
color,
different
though.
color?
that's why I'm
Or a
asking,
sky
like, yeah,
color?
I just don't know that, I think the color, you're the architect on the board, what's your point of view?
Well,
I would, the color of the building?
The lighter color, to me, kind of will have it drop away a little bit, rather than the darker color of the
If
brick.
the clouds are there, it'll be probably more appropriate, right?
You should have rendered it with gray day.
Yeah,
It just came to my attention as you look at that rendering.
the one thing about the frontal elevation views is you oftentimes don't perceive things that way, although here, where you're across the highway, and some of those homes are elevated a little bit, you might see it this way. But I do think that I agree with them on the lighter color, Sean.
Yeah, that community across from the highway, they are looking
That's
right at it.
right.
I mean, what's
Right.
happening now is we're bringing something, as you said earlier, it's large, it's long, and it'll be a very different view for them than what they've had. Yeah, I don't know what the right color is, but it looks quite obvious now.
It looks gray there, but I don't know if we even really picked a color. Did you?
We
Did you
have
pick
it gray, yeah,
Oh,
just
okay.
because.
Yeah.
I think it's gray because it appears
A
more
pale gray.
than a color.
Like that panel.
Yes, so that sort of brings me to one of the questions I had was the plant material choice along that where it was, for crab apples. And so crabs only get to be about 15 feet in height, and so I'm assuming that you chose those just because of the bump out of the building. But I sort of feel like you need something taller. to kind of minimize the look of the building to those neighbors in particular. And they're, plant material like corn beams or fastigiate maples or oaks will grow tall and narrow, and I think it might help break up the mass there. And then I think with crabs, they're messy. They drop their apples, and then the apples rot, and then, bees come in and rodents come in. And then I know my kids loved having these crab apple fights, so I could just imagine people throwing the crab apples down off the expressway. But, so I don't know if that is an appropriate
Yeah, what
tree.
we did was, originally was we sent the tree question to the stack. And they liked the crab apples because they thought it was better, that they were really worried that they just aren't going to survive facing the expressway. So, but it's up to,
We would be open to
I think
suggestions.
it can be changed. I just need to
And the
run
European-
changes past the group again, because it is a street tree. And they're supposed to have the final word on whether it's the right thing. It always has to be native, and maybe give us a list. I already wrote down some of the ones you said, to say, let's take a look. And then the trees, go around on Mechanic Street. Do you also feel like those should be larger? Because it seems to me like, you think those should be bigger too?
Yeah. And even on the back side, so that was another question. I think you just have arborvitaes there. So maybe the same tall trees should be there. And so I was wondering, are you doing a fence along that property line, or just the plan
That's in the back, right?
on Mechanic from those neighbors on Mechanic?
Well, the property comes to a point like this, Mechanic comes up like this, I think right here.
There's only a
is the
small
fence.
piece that's not
Yeah,
the building, the brick.
yeah.
So I don't believe.
Where the parking is?
No, it's just so you have the driveway for the parking, and then you have the arborvitae.
Yeah.
But isn't there something that grows on an open
It
fence?
says screen wall on the plan.
Yes, it's on the building.
Okay.
It's on the building?
It shows it on that ramp.
So like a deciduous tree would actually take up less space at the bottom. So if you have the arborvitaes planted, they're in masses at the bottom. So if you do like a shade tree, you could do a fence, and then you just put the single stem doesn't take up any space at your ramp, and then you get the height of the canopy.
We can look at that. I think the only, I'm not a big person. I think the only thing that the root structure that is, the canopy is essentially the same as the root structure dimension. So canopy spreads 30 feet, the root structure itself is spreading. So we have to be a little bit careful, because we are next to a ramp. And so we can't have the roots start to,
There has to be enough room.
they may not be enough. I absolutely appreciate the thought. I think we should look for something that we can review various ideas on that. And I think certainly a more columnar, vertical type of species, maybe it's a little taller than maybe the arborvitaes. We can certainly see if there's some other options out there.
I think that's an interesting question about the roots, because so many sidewalks are interrupted, for accessibility because of the roots. Can I just piggyback on one of your street tree comments? When I was looking at the civil plans, the plan calls for a tree grate for the street trees, but then in the details, it shows kind of an open pit for the street trees. And I thought we talked about having a grate, right? Yeah, it's just not in the detail, no.
And I was going to even take it one step, because sometimes those grates have issues, and like on Central Avenue, they do start to pop up as a tree starts to mature sometimes, and talking about accessibility, and then they get removed by the town, and what I was going to suggest, and it's something that I'm really interested in with new development projects, is doing a tree guards, which prevent, when you're walking your dog, they're not going to just pee on the tree, or it just protects it from car doors, people getting in and out. They look really nice. They can be done in like a black iron, low. I have some specs that I've actually discussed with Chase Berkeley as possibly, I would love to see in the Milton Village starting and East Milton Square giving sort of a unified look. So if you would be open to tree guards, they're not very expensive and it will really save the life and protect the trees long term.
I thought we actually, again.
I think we did might have,
We
so-
talked about so many different things, I think that one got lost.
Yeah,
We
that-
did talk about that.
We did talk about that, yeah.
I didn't know exactly what it was, I get a better.
And I can
idea
send
now.
you pictures of the manufacturer and, it doesn't have to be that exact,
I'm
but,
pretty sure,
and you can do plantings within them, at the base of the tree, it's really attractive for the streetscape.
so there's a sort of a fence around.
Exactly.
And then there's a sort of an open area inside the fence.
Exactly.
Which allows a little bit of.
You can plant within them at the base of the trees,
And plantings if you so.
and it really,
What do you have clear between that pit and the building in terms of walkable surface?
Between the pit and the building.
That's close to plan.
Yeah, you have enough room for people to pass one another, let's say pushing strollers or
Oh,
something?
yes.
Yeah, okay,
Oh, yes, yeah.
okay.
It is fairly, it doesn't look fairly large, so but yeah.
and I just was going to add to the trees. When they did the deck project over it and they planted new trees in front of Fitness Unlimited, along the Admiral's building, they put they were using the European hornbeams
okay.
there, and very columnar, so you can actually see them. So it would give a unified look to connecting to the rest of East Milton.
Do you know if they put power to those, so that if you wanted to put lights on the trees at the holidays? I've had that requested for our project that we've done in Stoughton, where it was one of the conditions of the special permit was to put power into the tree pits for that purpose.
Yeah, because they do light the trees on Adams Street. So. Yep.
Tony, what is the comparable difference in height from your building to the building on the end of Mechanic Street?
Is that existing building?
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're closer than how this rendering.
It must be. It's
Yeah, they
the
are.
rendering. It's a partial elevation, partial
Sure.
perspective.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not a pure straight on
Yeah.
elevation. So I think if anything, the buildings on the right and left are probably taller. It's because those buildings are set back in the perspective view. So when this drawing was created, it's a perspectival drawing.
Yeah.
The building is a little bit forward of those two buildings, so hence
Yeah.
they look smaller because they're recessing. If we were to do a true
Right.
elevation,
Yeah.
both those buildings outside will be taller.
Yeah.
I don't know the height of them, but I know it's a three-story building on the right.
Yeah.
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 So, and we're a four-story building.
Right.
So,
Yeah, there's one rendering that shows it.
the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Michael, it has to be. It can't be much more than 10, 12 feet.
I was going to say 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
So I have another question about, like the trash removal. I think in your memo, it said that the garbage and recycling trucks will pick up from a side entrance on Mechanic,
Yeah.
just as it takes place for residents on Mechanic Street. So
It'll be a private company.
oh, okay. So I was sort of visioning like 48 trash cans out on there. Okay.
But actually, the planning board always seems to require that in
Yeah.
the development.
Yeah, okay, so that's-
Sorry, some of the planning boards of the town, they say, well, it's not in our trash contract for this year, so you have to do private, and
Yeah,
it's just
okay.
private. But it does give the condominium control over,
Yeah.
the way the trash is picked up and the times and everything. So it's a good system. But the location will be as you described.
Yeah, and so where will the dumpsters be? Inside?
They're inside.
Inside.
The double door that trash can pull them out. It'll be quick.
Yeah, okay.
How close are you to what you consider your finished ballet?
Very close. I think, again, there's going to be tweaks and adjustments, but we have how many bricks we have in our office.
Yeah.
Between all the various projects in this firm, we probably have 40 brick samples there, and we chose the one that we like. So yeah, that's, I think, what you see for you.
Sure. My question probably I'm not suggesting any deviation from the brick that you've selected at all, but the facade on Granite Ave, essentially one color. As you thought through your process of what it would look like, did you consider at all introducing, any other color?
I think we went round about this a lot internally. I think we felt, and we studied other examples of other things that we've seen too, sometimes we study precedents. The thing that I think makes it, for us successful is that the palette is controlled, and it's of a palette. But I think it's surprising, even though the variation looks quite subtle here, but when you see materials that are different, brick is very fine grained and has texture versus smooth, and the way light hits it, it actually stands out more contrasting than you realize. And so even though it looks subtle, but I think actually when one views it, it's going to have quite a bit of variation. And between the nature of the materials, having the brick doing some of the in and outs, having details around the windows, the retail, and then of course as you wrap those palette around the side, I think it's going to be quite a rich building, but within a controlled way.
Yeah.
And it's a subtle thing. I mean, I'm often surprised, and Cheryl knows this, when you're architects, we often are looking at a lot of samples up close, but you don't really understand it until you've gotten more of it. You're stepping back away from it and you're seeing a different light. Because what you're seeing in your office is not necessarily what you see when you're in the field.
Sure.
And we did test it internally. We tested outside.
Yeah.
We even brought it to the site with our client. They looked at this. They looked at other samples. They liked this palette, and we thought it's pretty rich. And we went roundabout quite a bit in looking at this.
It's a rich palette, right, and it's in layers of colors and textures. That's what we're doing.
So I have a question relative to that in somewhat, because the windows that are in the brick are going to be set back, at least at the depth of the brick, or almost the depth of the brick, right? And then in the fiber cement, though, are they going to be more flush? Or are you working on a detail where those can be set back as well to get the shadow lines?
We're studying that. I think we're trying to create some shadow line effect to the extent we can. It's a different material, obviously, so detail's going to be different, Cheryl.
You're going to
We'd like to create some depth to that.
So, getting into the weeds a little bit, architect to architect, if you have like the exterior insulation, which you would have for the brick, if you have that for the fiber cement, you're going to be able to get your attachment of that window further in, right? So to give you that shadow line,
Yes.
right? Okay.
And we don't want it to be flat.
Right, because that's key in those notches in, that doesn't look too smooth and too flat.
Yeah.
Because like that's smooth already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why we're also trying to use detail in the brick, too, to create some variation and richness. It's not just all flat brick.
Rich, did you have any comments? I don't want to leave you out, but we just can't see you. All right. Rich? I don't see any questions from...
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Good, just want to check in.
So another question I have is about the paver parking area for those 5 spots. So I was just wondering, when you kind of design that, the parking space, would there be like a different color, banding? And so then actually the banding can provide the striping. So when the cars have pull in, they kind of know where to go. Yeah, so instead of doing, just a paint stripe. Okay.
By using the design of the pavers.
Yeah, and the color, a mix of the paver color. Yeah. And then I understand what, a green roof does, but what is it protecting underneath? What is the function of the actual structure of the green roof? Does it provide just covered parking?
It does.
Yeah.
Those 5 spaces, a good portion of it is going to be undercover as a result of that green roof. So
Yeah.
it is providing protection. It also, extends over the ramp down into the lower level. So the whole thing is providing, some protection from the elements.
Yeah.
In addition to providing also a more attractive feature to look at from the standpoint of both the neighbors as well as the residents seeing a green roof.
The green roof also receives drainage.
Good drainage.
Right. Yeah, because that's what I was.
Unless it's extremely heavy, it's somewhat, the idea is to spread it around and absorb
Yeah.
it, and then it evaporates. if it's a heavy rain, then it will go into the storm drain or down into the storm drain in the street.
Yeah, because I was just thinking instead of doing a green roof, you could do the, the grass grid paver. So you could grow grass and, on the ground, and that would kind of serve the same purpose
In the parking.
as a paver, yeah. But I'm not sure how it would
It's hard to maintain.
maintain for commercial use. Right,
Doesn't look
yeah,
so good up here.
yeah. So that was only my, yeah.
Yeah.
Sound like they're leaking car.
But I
Yeah.
think the pavers, if they're nicely chosen, will actually
Yeah.
be
Yeah,
quite.
yeah. No.
Any other questions?
Meredith, I had a question, if it's okay.
Yes, Tim, absolutely.
I'm gonna bring up the site plan, and I just wanted to see if you could talk for a minute about how you anticipate the sort of the in and out of the parking to go, because on this, the 16 foot on the kind of surface mechanic street is what it is. That 12 foot two-way down the ramp into the basement, I see that there's traffic signals, but if you could just give us a kind of like play-by-play of how you anticipate people to go in and out, and kind of how to handle the conflict of someone, trying to leave and someone trying to come in.
No, I thank you for that question, and we did anticipate that might be coming. So yeah, a 12 foot, is nominally more a one-way width, because normally you need on the order of closer to like 18 feet to 20 feet if you're truly doing a ramp. But we believe that when we have signalization at the top and the bottom for two reasons. One, so if somebody is, say, coming down into the garage and someone below is trying to go out or come up, the person who, because it's all going to be car key access when you enter a garage, so that will immediately have a light situation that will occur in the garage, so that if there is somebody below, they will know that there is someone coming down. I live in Cambridge. I have an underground garage, parks about 20 cars, and on the rare occasion when I come out of the garage and someone's coming down, we don't have a light signal there. It's just literally the garage door starts to rise, and I'm like, okay, someone's coming down because the garage door is rising. But we'll have that, and we'll also have the light issue. It's also a safety issue as well at the top of the ramp. So if there is anybody walking, they will know the car is emerging, coming out. So there's not, the car will know also that, when you emerge out of the ramp, they won't be conflicting. I think that given the number of cars that are in this, which is at the moment 19 spaces below, on the very rare occasion where I think a car coming down and a car going up is occurring at the same time, we believe between the signalization, the car key access, and the lights warning that there's someone coming, that will in effect act as the safety issue with respect to that. I mean, we're in conversation with our parking consultant on all of this. So I think there are ways that this happens. We have a project we did in the city, to Penny said,
Yes.
that is even a more difficult situation, an even narrower ramp, it's only 10 feet wide, and cars going in and out, and this is a much more urban location where you have a lot less ability to even queue. We believe it works, but I think that's just how we feel.
This doesn't have a sound component to it, do it?
A
You
sound,
mean like a warning?
Like a beeping
Yeah,
when you
because I
come out
would be
sometimes.
concerned about that, a direct abutter there, if it did have the noise.
I think it's light versus sound.
Okay.
And again, we're working with our parking consultant to study technical options with regard to all of this.
Okay.
So real quick, is there, at either location, the top or the bottom or both, is there a door or a gate? Like when you talk about key access, what is that accessing for you?
So there will be a garage door, which will be placed, underneath the covered portion. So if the garage door, and someone's coming down, and they press the key fob, whatever, of course the garage door will start to rise. Lights will illuminate for those underground, so they know that someone is coming down. Simultaneously, if someone's coming out of the garage, the same thing is going to happen. The garage door is going to start to rise. A light will start to probably flash or something to indicate that somebody's emerging out of the garage. And it'll, of course, only be for the time it takes for someone to come in and out of the garage. This is not like on for like 10 minutes. This is like we're talking, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It's not like it's going to be a long time. It's just enough time for a car to physically come in and out.
So where would the car that would be coming into the building be as it's waiting for the car coming out?
I think they would be waiting at just before the ramp access. In other words, if they see a light start to blink, they know that someone's coming up. So they're not going to start to try to drive down the ramp while someone's literally trying to come up the ramp at the same time.
Basically, we'll have a red light.
Yeah, they'll have a warning light, like
But you're
somebody's
saying
emerging.
the anticipation is that this 19 spaces, that this isn't going to be, well, from experience especially, some of our architects are actually living with this arrangement, that you don't have a lot of up and down at the same time.
Right.
But the safety feature is the door and the light at the top and the light at the bottom. So it's not possible for you to proceed if someone's coming up and vice versa. And we don't expect that, there's another garage as well, and there are assigned spaces. So we expect that this will be manageable in terms of the flow up and down.
And so if the person parking on Mechanic, waiting to get down, and someone comes down Mechanic, they would just have to wait behind that waiting car. There's not a,
Go around.
they can go around. Okay, yeah, because it's a one-way. Yeah,
And
okay.
again, in all my experience, again, my garage is very similar to this, 20 cars.
Yeah.
Underground, it's in Cambridge. I would say in 10 plus years of parking there, the amount of times I've actually encountered someone coming down, coming up at the same time is less than a handful.
Yeah.
Literally, I mean, it's less than a half dozen times in 10 years of living in this, and dealing with the garage. So that's just my own personal anecdotal experience, but I think it's probably not going to be dissimilar when you actually think about people coming in. Just, they're not all rushing in and out at the same time.
Tony, can I ask a question? I'm on slide 21. Tim, could you take us to slide 21, please?
Slide 21.
Thank you. So the material on the underside of the overhang, the second floor protrudes out beyond the first floor. Is that the same material that you're proposing for the facade at the residential entrance?
I think we haven't really gone
No, we
to that
haven't.
level yet.
On the underside of the overhang will be a metal
Metal.
product.
Okay.
Yeah, this product that is being suggested in my watercolor sketch, I think this is still TBT. We're
Yeah,
really looking
cementitious
through.
something.
It's going to be some kind of cementitious, which is attractive, it's durable, it'll resist, wear and tear. It's going to signal the residential piece, but what that actual material is, we're still
Yeah.
studying.
So the sketch, you had mentioned earlier that the base below the glass, you see it as granite.
Yes.
Yeah, this part
And,
here.
right, and that looks like it's tall.
I think it's,
A foot?
what is it, 18?
12 to 18.
Yeah, it's
12 to
12, 18
18
inches
okay.
of granite.
Would you consider using granite at the residential entrance?
I mean,
We could explore that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we haven't really gotten into that level.
Yeah, I'm just,
I mean,
there's a richness to it
Yeah.
that really makes that entrance
Right.
look
there is
very,
a relevance too. I mean,
Yes.
it's the granite railway
Exactly.
and
It's
all
exactly.
that, and-
right down
And we
the,
want to do something inside. We have a very large lobby, and we want to talk with the library and get some, historic pictures and kind of have that as, we haven't named the building, but we're leaning towards, that, something in that field.
Yeah, I think I personally, as an architect, I think that granite is a great suggestion. I mean, it's a very durable, it's really attractive material. It signifies something special, and it's for the residents. So I know it's a bit more expensive than some other materials, but
But it's not a huge area.
not a
It's a
huge
small
area.
area.
So
No,
I
it's a
think
small
that's
area,
it's
yeah.
a great suggestion.
Yeah.
We'll look at ideas for
And it
that.
sets it off from the commercial,
Yeah.
right?
it does. I think it really establishes your building as a really fine building. You enter a building that has a brick I guess, veneer. You know, it's, and one last question on this rendering. The sidewalk finishes with a brick border before it hits the curb? Is that actually how you intend to build it, or am I?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, the curb has.
We want to do what is down in the square in some of the areas.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't think it goes, I think there might be, I don't think it goes right to the curb.
Well, we'll have to
To the granite,
what's in
to the granite curbing.
Great.
It's what's in the square.
Great, okay, thank you.
All right, let's go to the public to see if we have any members from the public who would like to speak. Tim or Cable? We'll give
If
them
there's
a
anyone
moment.
out there in the attendees, if you want to raise your hand, we can acknowledge you and we can say your piece. We have Andrew D'Amato. Andrew, if you can just say your name and address for the record.
Sure. It's Andy D'Amato, 26 Fair Street. And I'm the East Milton Neighborhood Association board member. I just wanted to bring that up. One thing I did want to say just in general is that the board of the East Milton Neighborhood Association feel that like the planning board as well as all the other town citizens should be aware that we have met with Mr. Moore on several occasions by himself, without an attorney or an entourage of paid consultants. No offense. But Mr. Moore he's really listened to us in earnest. He was not just checking the boxes. And, he had his team working on ways to find some compromises to try to mitigate the issues that our neighbors brought forward, and we really appreciate that. While we know there's still work to be done, we're anxious to hear this board's opinion and comments on the most recent plans, the way you've been doing it tonight, and there was a lot of good ideas brought forward, and I can appreciate that. But we certainly encourage the board to move efficiently and expeditiously as the issues of the changing of the planning board loom, with the election. Not to mention this is the 20th or so meeting regarding this project. So, sort of the process with this mutual respect and cooperation between the neighbors and developers, helped, I want to believe, helped make some substantial changes to the project, lowering the entire floor, removal of the automated parking system, which was controversial to some, and changes to the exterior facade, as noted here. And I still think, we're moving closer to the existing architecture of the neighborhood, but I think there's still some fine tuning to be done there on that facade. And I don't know if, I think you hit a lot of them. And, if we could see some of those options, I think it would be great. And converting, the first floor residential units back to commercial is something I think was important to do. It'll provide town amenities and maybe a greater, tax benefit to the town. And I know, I think we should encourage that. If there's any relief that needs to be done as far as parking goes for that, the neighborhood association board members are in line with that if it's necessary. And I guess that's it. And finally, we expect this level of communication will continue as the project moves, through the process. And I just wanted, again, to thank Mr. Moore and the planning board for the incredible amount of work that has already taken place on this project. And we're encouraged that we seem to be on, the back nine, or maybe even the 18th hole, who knows. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much for your comments. Appreciate it. Tim, are you seeing anyone else from the public?
I am not, but I will continue to keep my eye
Okay,
on the list.
that's great. I did a letter just to share that came in late. We were getting a lot of things late from Marion and from different sources, but just a letter, somebody who actually had another meeting tonight and couldn't attend, and you all will have this in your inbox. Dear Milton Planning Board, first I would like to acknowledge the enormous amount of time you volunteer helping to safeguard the town. Thank you. While it seems the applicant has listened to many of the comments of the board by addressing the brick skin, lower level parking areas, and some additional landscaping, more must be done to enhance the design and better integrate the structure into the surrounding community. It does not go unnoticed that the current parcel has been combined from 4 individual parcels that contain a mix of 18th century structures that would have been a part of a railway village. By combining the lots, unique challenges occur to allow a mega structure to integrate this type of built environment. The process all starts with the building footprint, which currently occupies not only the entire site, but also cantilevers out over the public right-of-way. The cantilever does not allow for proper visual support for the massing on the upper floors, and the building appears to float above a glass plinth. Brick columns should land at the edge of the property and perhaps could form a covered arcade. The brick detail needs more richness to enhance the building and not make it appear so static. This can be done with a brick cornice wrapping along the top of the building, and even belt courses at each floor and along the window wells. The current cantilever design produces more shadows than would normally be in the case, even with a zero lot line construction, and should be prohibited. The site plan shows trees lining the streets, but they will fail due to the lack of light and space needed for even the most fastidious type of tree to survive. Again, the building should be pulled back to the lot line. The glass railings should be restudied as they become distracting features on the building and require constant cleaning maintenance. Aluminum picket railings or similar could be used and allow for greater creativity in the design. Lastly, the corner is an underwhelming gateway to the town of Milton and should be a focal point of the composition. Additional resources should be allocated for the design and construction that would help anchor or the building and create significant value. Corner treatments such as rounded features, strong support, and appropriate detailing could make this property a showcase for the new residents as well as the town. The building corner should act as a gateway/marker from a distance. I have attached a photo of the Whitney Hotel in Beacon Hill, which was designed by Hayson Architects, recently built, incorporating many of the design elements mentioned above. The Whitney Hotel was reviewed and approved by the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission. Since its completion, it has been very well received in the community, has received many awards, and could be used as a source of inspiration for this project. Thank you for your time. John David Corey, 1452 Canton Ave. And there's a picture included. So just to read that into the public record. I've struggled with this. I think this project, from a density perspective and design, which we are limited, the planning board in site plan approval is limited in what we can say, and ask of you architecturally. My concern is that, and I think there's opportunity here, that this emphasizes the density, the massing, because it's a monochromatic and just a brutalistic style of design does tend to emphasize size and is a more imposing structure than something that did have, more variation of materials to it. And I guess it's, there is, I'm looking at this, and it was interesting looking and seeing this, the perspective. When you drive in Cambridge, and you live in Cambridge, on Memorial Drive, you've got MIT structures and you've got Harvard structures. And there's a warmth and something inviting about when you see the Harvard University style of architecture. And I'm not saying that this needs to be that, but then you see MIT, which is a very cold, more brutalistic in a lot of the buildings there, which are architecturally, great buildings, and so it's nothing to do with this architecture. It's the style, and what I think when we're going to be, and this is, you're ahead of this, but we're looking at overlay zoning and design guidelines, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about is context to the town, relationship, and really trying to knit East Milton Square together. And what I would love to see is this trying to be part of East Milton Square, not an island unto itself. And I know, we look at it and we all want to see this developed, and we all want to see this move forward. But I think the architectural style of the building, and I do want to say thank you so much, and I should have opened with that, saying for the changes that you've made, taking the fourth story off, the parking, and even changing to the brick is huge, and I am grateful for that, and I know the rest of the board probably feels the same way, and it definitely warms up the building. In many ways, it was interesting. We had Walcott Woods, which was actually a special permit that was approved. And then the applicant actually came back to the planning board and said, you know what? He began working with a different architectural firm, which is not what I'm suggesting at all, but he came back with a different design for the buildings, and the buildings were greatly improved, and it was a volunteer that the developer said, I'd like to do something, and I believe he's getting a higher price for his units because of those architectural changes. And I just want to say that this is a very specific look to a building, and from a marketing perspective, I think sometimes design, selections and value can be connected, and I just again we have very limited power in what we can say and ask you to do, but I think thinking of this in context to the town, there's nothing else that this compares to in Milton except for maybe this building, Town Hall. That was a similar architectural style. And at the time, I'm sure everyone thought it was a really cool, sexy new look for Milton. And, and now we plant trees in front of it. But I just would like for, that the thought of how to warm up this building and how it relates to the other, historic buildings in the town. But I do appreciate everything that you've done to get to this point. I really do. Yeah.
So we've been here 20 meetings a year.
Yeah.
I'm working with Feingold Alexander. I think they're a great architectural firm. I think they've done a fantastic job listening to us, the developers, to the neighbors. We're not redesigning this building. There's no more to give. And I say that earnestly, that we're looking for a vote tonight on this project. I think we're entitled to it. I think we deserve it. And this is it. I think they've done a great job on the design. And I find it slightly offensive, Meredith, that you read out that letter tonight. Who is this person? Who?
It was John David yeah, sorry.
Show up. And
he's at the Shade Tree Committee meeting tonight, so I'm sorry, but that's...
We've spent hours and hours reviewing design, Marion will attest to this. I feel that this is a good project for the town. I think it fits within a very difficult site, and it's either what we are presenting. I'm not saying we can tweak some of the material selection or shading, but this is it, and it's either us or somebody else, and we're ready to move on to build this thing or move away, and that's I'm speaking for Pat Costello, myself, and my brother. It's time we ask you to vote on this project. I think we're entitled to a vote, and I think it's a good project for the town.
Thank you, and I appreciate
So just to clarify, I understand your frustration. I've been in your place before, and my special permit, when I did not change anything, took 2 years to go through. So I completely understand. But from my perspective, this is a new application. I'm a new member to the board, and this is really the only third meeting that I've had time to review. So I am totally sympathetic with your frustration. But also, I just feel like I'm new, and I haven't had time to talk to all the neighbors and listen to, and I've done a lot of homework to get caught up to speed. But I just think that pushing for a vote on a new application, where really this is just the third, is kind of a lot to ask. And again, like as I understand it, for site plan approval, one of the things that we're supposed to take into consideration is the adequate provisions for off-street loading and unloading. And that provision hasn't been met. And I'm open for not meeting that provision, but in not meeting that provision, I also feel like there is something the town should get. If we're giving you that, then maybe we should also get something. In that, I think, is the architecture of the building. And I'm not an architect. I just know what I want Milton to look like, and everybody wants this to be built, and everybody wants you to build it, because you live here, and we want you to build it, and we don't want you to walk away. And that's one of the things, is we want our locals to be part of Milton. So
we're not going to redesign this building.
Yeah.
We're not going to redesign
Yeah.
this building. Because you have to believe in something, and I believe in this building.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is.
I do want to just mention on the off-street loading and unloading that we did discuss traffic and parking last time and reviewed that. Our traffic engineer was here. And the concept behind the on-street loading provision is it's 3 parking spaces. It's flexible. We had in the parking management plan, you'll see I talk about how we would organize parking for moving vans, and then the rest of the time would be the normal deliveries. The concept is, yes, there's not much space. At that time, we still had the automated parking when we came up with the plan, but I think the same thing applies now. We want to provide adequate parking for residential use and to the extent we can for the commercial use. The commercial entities are in the front of the building, not in the rear, and this is where we provided the parking. It also keeps that type of small truck and delivery parking off Mechanic Street and away from the residential neighbors on Mechanic Street. So that's the theory or concept behind the on-street provision of parking, and that particular concept was discussed last year and this year, and could be discussed more, but we did have that as a topic at our last meeting. We didn't have any further discussion of it, and I personally believe that in this case it makes good sense to have that parking where it is, that it will be more useful to the businesses. It's right by the front entrance of the building, so if somebody has an Uber pickup or they're having something delivered, the driver stops briefly, gets out, puts it right inside the lobby where there's going to be space for dropping off things, and gets right back in the car and leaves. And in terms of congestion, those delivery vehicles, the ones we see all the time around our neighborhoods, they do avoid highly congested times. So I expect that the phasing of deliveries will fit the traffic situation and that they won't be as likely to try to deliver them. But if they do, we have the 3 spaces. And then there are other parking spaces as well. So that's the theory behind it. I just wanted to answer it because I don't remember discussing it when you were here. And, well, that's why the plan was developed the way it was.
I'd just like to make a comment about the loading. I mentioned at our last meeting where we talked about the parking that to hold one project or one applicant to a level, a standard that the rest of East Milton Square and the rest of town is not held to, I feel is wrong. And the same thing applies on the loading. We have antiquated bylaw that no one can meet. It's why we haven't had investment, as Tim said, in our business district in a very long time. In a town that is mostly residential tax base and people clamor for more commercial tax revenue, we have our zoning set up that you can't invest in our business district. So I don't think it's right to try and hold this project to a different standard than anyone else who's operating in East Milton Square on the loading side. And I just want to make a comment. You know, I've been on the board for 8 years. I've been an architect for 30. I have a master's and a bachelor's in architecture. So ever since high school, I've been involved in architecture, and I'm not young anymore. And you know, what I learned in school, I would not call this brutalist design. And I wouldn't call this inappropriate architecture either. Because, you know, architecture is a matter of opinion. And, you know, Beacon Hill is different than East Milton Square. And we've talked about Milton Village being different than East Milton Square. And what we're looking to do is have some investment to help revitalize East Milton Square. And so we don't have design guidelines. And so we don't have zoning in place. So they're sort of out there on this limb. And what I would say is, what I've heard other people say before is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is a good project. Is it perfect for any one of us? Maybe not. But is this good for Milton? I would say yes. This is a good project for Milton. And what if they do walk away? Do you think it's going to stay the same as it is today? It will not. Something else will happen on this site. And what will that be? That didn't work out so well on Bassett Street. So I'd like for you all to think very carefully about that and listen to what they've had to say. They've worked very hard on this project. I've been at every one of the meetings, and I've heard and seen all of the work that they've done on it in good faith. And so I would like for us to move forward on the vote that they've asked for tonight.
Rich has his hand up.
Yes, Rich, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yep, thanks, Tim. Sorry, I never can tell if you can see it or not, but yeah, just a few points. My first comment would be on parking. I agree. There's been a few comments about parking. I do think I'm okay with giving a little bit on that. I know I have a different view as I'm on the board, and folks that have been on the board before, but my view on parking is simple. If let's for instance say, hey, we've got to put in two spaces for every room, or say 3. My opinion is if you build it, they will come. If you put in a lot of parking, you're going to see people, more families come in, more big, people with lots of cars. That adds more traffic. And I know we're always talking about traffic. The reality is this has limited parking for the people that are buying these units. And I can tell you, for my family, if I have 2 cars, I'm not buying one, especially if I can't get 2 units. Two parking spaces. So I like that. I mean, you're seeing it all over the state. You're seeing it all over the country. The same thing is happening everywhere. The loading zone, I think we've talked about that a bit. I liked the idea of what they were planning on doing. in the front of the building. Hopefully, I know we can't talk about that stuff now, but I'm hoping that the town makes some accommodations right on Granite Street. I agree, this has been a really long process. I can appreciate your comment. I definitely don't discount it, Maggie. I mean, it is tough when things travel across, terms and things like that. It's pretty common. And I remember when I came on, there were things that I wasn't as involved with because it was a year before my time. But, just going back a bit, this developer came around, we went through a long process, and we basically said no to them because they didn't get to where we wanted to be. They went back, and you heard from, Andy today, Mr. D'Amato, and, I really appreciated his comments because the neighborhood and, the developers, the lawyers, architects, they've worked on this for a long time and got it this far. I'm sure we can go back and forth on different, aesthetics and things like that and tweak it, but I'm feeling pretty good about what I'm hearing tonight about them going back and maybe tweaking things here and there. I really liked, Maggie, your comment about the trees. I'm not a huge fan of crabapple trees. They make a mess, but I am hopeful that there was a lot of comments that they're gonna, make some changes there. So I for one, really hope we can move this forward. If folks have some things they want to dive into to make sure we talk through, I'm open for that too. But, I've seen this come around, this type of project coming around before, and folks walk away, or developers get upset, and it's not pretty after that. So I would feel awful for the folks in East Milton if this project does not get through, and then something worse comes through. So that's all I have to say.
Great, Rich. Thank you so much. Sean? Were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
I am. Yeah, I am. I'm new to this, and I appreciate the frustration you have and what you've been through. And I think there's been previous experiences in Milton where developers have had gone a long time to try to get to a project approval. And in the short time that I've been in my role as a planning board member, and really probably more recently, have seen the changes in the project, and I think you responded honestly to what's been asked. I'm not a person that responds well to demands, but I understand why you asked what you asked for. So let me.
We had a zoning meeting in less than 3 weeks that we postponed twice.
So
if you're impatient with us, too.
So Michael, if you just let me finish, because there's something for me that is very important. And for me, what's very important is that Rich votes on this project. He's been on the board for 5 years. This is his neighborhood, and he deserves the opportunity to vote on this project. And my proposition for a compromise is move this to the 13th, let a vote occur on the 13th, whatever details were discussed today, have a chance to consider some of the questions that were asked today, and we vote on the 13th. Rich gets to be a part of the vote. He deserves that. He's a representative of his community, and maybe that's a bit of a balance between what you want and the responsibility that we all have to consider some of the things that came up today. I think you did a great job addressing the parking, and this is in response to the neighbors. Andy D'Amato spoke in favor of the project. Every resident in town has a right to speak, and whether you live on Canton Ave or whether you live in Andy's neighborhood, this is the way the system works, they have a right to express their point of view. I feel we should be committed to a vote on the board on the 13th and allow Rich to be part of it, and just give us the 2 weeks, and you guys can have the 2 weeks between now and then to address whatever comments were made today.
Fair.
I think it's a great suggestion.
Share some of those tree suggestions with us.
I appreciate that, Sean.
Yeah.
Rich, 5 years is a long time for this project.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of hours. I think everybody in East Milton Square knows that you've been representing their point of view, and you've earned it and you deserve it.
I agree.
So my only request would be that I have specific comments from Maggie Oldfield about trees. So, and I heard about some examples of trees that you like. So if you or anyone else on that issue has a tree, suggestion of a type of tree, if you could just send it to Tim Cherwinski, he'll pass that along to us. On the other comments, I tried to take notes. But if you have specific thoughts and you're not sure if it got across to me or to anyone else, send it to Tim and he will make sure that we address it. So we tried to cover a lot of material tonight and you've really been patient about that and appreciate that. We want to make sure that we do every possible response that we can. We really need to vote, whatever it is, at your next meeting, because on the 19th, we're meeting with the Board of Appeals, and they've continued their hearing a couple of times because it's very important to the Board of Appeals to know what the planning board thinks about the project. And I think we've learned a lot tonight that will be useful when we go back to the Board of Appeals. So appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone else feels the same.
Yeah, one last comment was about, I appreciate the commercial space, but I was a little concerned that the hours were only going till 6 o'clock at night. I would think that you might want to, extend those hours, because as a small business owner, if a pottery shop went in there and they wanted to do a pottery class, I would think that the businesses there should have the same opportunity as the businesses on Adams Street. So I don't know if those times are set in stone, but I would.
Well, yeah, I don't know if they are, and so we'll respond on that.
Yeah, and they don't have to be open till 9. But if it's a certain business, or if a florist goes in there and they have a wake the next day or a wedding, they should be able to work.
We haven't really talked about the hours, so since our initial proposal, like 2 years ago or whatever, we certainly were trying to indicate that we would be managing the types of business, not me, but the owner would be managing the types of businesses that would go in, and that the attempt would be to make them low impact rather than large restaurants. I always use that example because that seems to be the most impactful use in East Milton Square. So we'll come back and we'll talk about it. The amount of commercial parking space currently provided doesn't meet the zoning bylaw. That will require a variance, and we are asking the planning board to support us in that request. I think it will be important to the Board of Appeals, but you can never speak for the Board of Appeals. I don't know what they'll decide. Maybe it could be an issue that would be either or if it puts too much pressure somehow, but it does seem to me there's something to think about there. So
Marion or Tim, may I? Just in terms of process and procedure, does the Zoning Board of Appeal have to make their decision before we make ours?
No, after.
No, after?
No, it's actually, I've seen it in parallel track. There aren't a whole lot of these. But when you have this situation, either board will make a decision, but it will be contingent on the other board approving the required relief. So in your case, you can decide site plan review criteria to the extent that you decide. If you decide, or a majority of you decide that we've met those requirements, you can vote a site plan approval, but you're going to have a condition that it's conditioned on the required zoning relief. If the Board of Appeals were to do their decision first, they would say it would be conditioned on the planning board deciding that the application meets site plan approval requirements.
Okay.
So that's the reason we have a time constraint is exactly what John Fahey referred to, which is Rich Baylor is going to be going off the board and has been here all this time. It would be great if he could vote on this application, and so we really would like to see it.
So I just, okay.
Maybe not a final decision, but see, if you do a vote, you can then work out the draft of a decision.
Right, that's what I wanted to ask Rich about.
You're losing a member of the board.
Right, that's the thing, because if we close the public hearing, and then we should have a draft decision to review, which has conditions in it. If you want Rich to be able to vote on the decision, he has to review the decision. So normally we have a draft decision. I don't know if it's normally done at the same day that we close the public hearing. But you have to keep the public hearing open long enough to take any new documents in. So if we're going to have new documents, I guess I'm just wondering how we get it done in one meeting, typically. So was the tree, I'm just trying to understand what we still need as documents, the tree revision or some,
I think we'd like to get the entrance to 440 finalized for the next meeting. That
Tree document.
The materials on that.
Possible
The materials.
changes
Yeah,
to
that would be great.
trees.
That was a great suggestion.
The entrance to the main entrance design exterior.
okay.
Right. You wanted some more information about the windows.
And then the
if we can
fence.
provide.
So, Marion, at times, in the past, you've drafted a decision for us to review. I'm wondering whether it makes sense for you to do that here, knowing that it's going to be revised, but at least, so we have a starting point so that we could get to a decision that Rich can vote on at the next meeting. 'Cause otherwise, I just don't see how it's going to get done, honestly.
And you could
decision-
circulate that,
Yeah,
give it to Tim in advance for us
I
to
can
look at.
circulate in terms of how, I have to be very careful about how that's done because, but I think it's possible. I have a few other site plan
Yeah.
decisions I can look at. Because you're going to end up having choices to make as you go through the draft, which is the way you have to do it because the board decides what goes to the decision. But if it would help, I have time to do that and I'll try to draft something so that you'll have a framework and you might be able to finish that at the next meeting. But you will get it before the meeting. It won't be for a few days, next week, later on in next week. Is that okay? It's going to be, when are you meeting again? 16th, right?
13th.
2 weeks from today.
So,
Oh, 2 weeks, okay.
when you
End of next week. I'll get it back.
So when you draft that, a couple of things we've talked about, which would normally go into the conditions, I think, would be like the voluntary contribution to the traffic mitigation fund. I had forgotten about that. And,
If you give us a suggestion there, that would be helpful, Cheryl, since you brought it up.
well,
But, you know.
I'm not, I think you can think about what you think makes sense too, because I just think where we're looking at a couple of things here that you don't have the zoning in place, you don't have the things in place, so you're not really subject to some of these things, but they will be subject for projects coming down the pike once we get the zoning done, right? Just like the affordability. So think about
I
what
think
makes
Tim-
sense for you, just because it would be nice to say that this project made that contribution, this project, provided these affordable units. And if we said what the AMI would be in that draft, so these are just, I want you to think about these things
Right.
so that before, we get
need to
it.
see the draft.
Yeah. Those are the two that I think really,
Actually, I think we can come up with a proposal on the contribution, because Tim Truminski gave a pretty good explanation at the last meeting about how you would use this relating to a particular project, so.
I mean, you could look at the zoning that's in place, which I think had some formulas for it. I don't recall what the formulas are right now, but maybe Tim
Like
could send that to
Mills,
you.
maybe? Does that have it?
It's a general, it's a zoning bylaw. It has limited application
Oh,
right now.
I know the zoning bylaw. Yes,
And
okay,
that was
however.
one we were supposed to come back and update
Yes, it's very
several years ago, but
The bylaw doesn't actually require a contribution because of the situation when you tried to draft that and did a lot of work, I know. We haven't gone back to it. Yes, I will look at that again, see if that can provide some guidance. But yes, we'll do that.
because
What else?
former member Brian Furs did some research on that and to come up with those formulas of what makes sense for what kind of project.
Yeah.
So those haven't been looked at probably in 5 years or something. But I probably have the research in my record someplace. But it's a starting point anyway for you to look at.
I think I have some, somewhere, I have some information on that. I remember the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to look back, if you give me
That's
just
great.
1 or 2 minutes,
Sure.
I want to look back at my scratchy notes here to see what other points we may be able to respond to, and then see if there's anything else, you could send it to Tim Truminski, but,
Conduit, we talked about the conduit underground.
right, that's
Putting
probably
that-
not going to be reasonable. I suppose we could, all right, we could talk about what we would need in order to do that or something.
Right, exactly, based on, yes. Yeah.
And if you could let us know that window is available to be seen at that, which particular one we should ask for if we go, that's not far from us, from here for us just to swing by there, right?
Artisan.
Yeah. I would go by and take a look at that.
The only other thing I was thinking about the commercial space, they're kind of broken up. So what if there was one business who wanted to take more space? They're not really next to each other?
Well, two are next to each other and one is on the other side.
Okay, so there was a,
So
There's a
yes,
stairwell
period.
between
Yeah,
them. Okay.
I mean, it depends on how you draft your decision, but
Yeah.
the way I've described commercial space is general, I describe it as total square footage. There's this much square footage of
Yeah.
commercial space. Because in theory, although I don't know how practical it would be, you could probably even divide a unit into, if you wanted to have something really small and two people who wanted really small space. If you don't agree with me, this is a good time to say that, but
No,
my feeling is
I'm
that
just
it's-
grateful that you've restored
Yeah.
all the commercial space. So
it's-
I don't have an
It's
opinion. I've seen it done
flexible, so
multiple
yes,
ways.
the answer to what you're saying is, yeah, it's possible you could.
so maybe not design your, or draft your decision saying 3 distinct, just saying of the possibility of the total square footage would be for commercial.
Yeah, okay.
I know, that's.
Yeah, the affordability, you suggested a different approach. We could talk about that. I don't know when we're going to get to meet with it.
Maybe just even a phone call to the chair,
Yep,
just for some feedback from the Affordable Housing Trust.
just small points, fencing on the trees, that different design.
On the affordability, I would simply just make it, I mean, we've got language from elsewhere, eligible for inclusion on the subsidized housing.
No, but we wanted less than 80% AMI, Tim.
Oh, yeah?
You're interested in the idea of having us do that. I want to talk to them and see.
Because rather than 2 at 80% AMI and a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust, I was interested in what the Affordable Housing Trust thinks of having, rather than the contribution, knock it down to, say, 70% AMI.
Okay.
That means a lower price, so that's
You know,
something I'll
I
talk to
understand.
them about. Yeah.
But we see a lot of 70% in Boston.
Yeah.
Oh.
And, the income level difference is about $20,000, so it goes from like 78 to 58. So that's a pretty big difference if you think about a school teacher salary, for example, or an entry-level nurse, or, there's people who work in town at these kind of positions that can make a difference, yeah.
Absolutely. That's great.
Okay, that's a pretty good summary. I know it's a lot of things, but I have notes. Sometimes what I do is I prepare a list of topics. Maybe I won't do that with you. I always send it around to the working group here. So after a meeting, we have notes, and then we all look at it and say, this is what we covered, this is what we need to do. So it's sort of a list of things I have to look into. So while I'm also looking at doing a draft, I might give you something preliminary as well to review first, just so we don't waste time.
That's great.
So if you're willing to
That's
review
great,
it,
yeah.
that would be great. And I'd send that to Tim Truinsky, and he would circulate it. So that,
I'm just going to correct myself, 58,000 was at 60% AMI. So, you can see whether that's doable or not. Or maybe you do one at 60 and one at 80, something, at least get one lower, pretty good amount lower. That might hit that entry-level teacher position.
And then also just, again, this is just a small thing, but I don't know if you're married to the clear railings. I feel like a lot of times people put a lot of their stuff or not so nice looking furniture, plastic, colorful furniture. So maybe it could be, a more solid railing, just so the neighborhood, they're not looking at all different colored plastic furniture up and down the side of the building.
We have done,
Yeah.
this is looking at translucent
They put a tint on
The
it.
tint, which
I
obscures
was
the
thinking, I was wondering about that. That
We
was,
have looked at that, and
Yeah.
they've done that in some other instances in condos in the city.
that would, I think, be just
So
more
maybe we
fitting
could
in.
look at that.
We could
We would look at that, that would be huge, that, yeah,
We could study that.
yeah.
Right. You
You
have
can-
full agenda, so.
Yeah, you
Good.
can't, I know you can't discuss once you're done with this outside the meeting. If you forgot, if you think I didn't notice something you said, then you can make sure Tim has a copy of it and send us in.
Great.
Thank you very much for speaking.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you for all the work you've done. Okay, so with that, we need to have a motion to move the public hearing to April 27th. I'm sorry, April 13th. Sorry, April 13th.
Yeah, I make
Do we
a
already
motion.
have, I'm sorry, do we have something already on the,
We do, we have
at
no
what
right time.
time?
Oh, at
Does
the,
it need to say
We've got
7:10?
Highland Street.
yeah, we have Highland Street. Tim, do you remember what time that was?
7:05, 7:15, we continued this to 7:30.
Didn't you say no to public hearings on one night?
So what's the continuation?
Didn't you say no to public
wanna move
hearings?
to
At the exact same time?
Did we say 7:15 and?
I did, yeah.
It just needs to be
Yeah, that'll be-
definite. And you can
We can-
then say it will be, we're all
Later.
here, but we need more
Yeah,
time for the
exactly.
first one, right? You have one
Right.
first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Leaving, I
All right.
guess I better-
Thank you
So-
so much. Although I may ask that second Highland Street to maybe allow you to go first if it looks like something that would be, I think
We'll be
Highland
here.
Street might be longer, so.
So you could say, you could say 7 o'clock and then let Highland be at 7:05.
All right, Tim,
Yeah,
does that sound good?
that sounds fine.
I just think Highland Street's going to take a lot longer.
So sorry, Maggie was making a motion, but I
Make a-
Oh,
interjected.
yeah, make a motion to move the public hearing to April 13th at 7 o'clock.
I think technically, sorry, continue.
Oh, continue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call. Maggie?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes. Great. And so now we can move on to new business and the presentation of our upcoming 1 Elliott Street special permit application.
Can I make a request?
Sorry?
And if we could have Mira jump the line.
Okay. Is that, sorry. Is Mira on?
I can promote her right now.
Okay. I think this is very exciting. Sorry. These were, sorry, these were. Welcome.
Mira, can you hear us?
Yes, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
welcome.
Oh, I have twice. So can someone?
You should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, I was just hoping I could share without my speaker notes.
I'm pulling it up. It's just taking me 30 seconds. You can start by introducing yourself while I get it started.
Hi, I'm Mira Patel. I'm the environmental coordinator. We've met before. Today I'm taking the time to talk about the stormwater in Milton. We're doing some projects about it, but Milton is part of an MS4 program, the permit, which is required for the population that we have.
I could sign the book if you could figure it out.
Me. So it has certain requirements every year that we do, some things like, sending out outreach about stormwater issues or, even going before the select board and updating them on what's going on. So, are you getting set?
It went black on me. Bear with me. Thanks for your patience.
So this year was a review of our bylaws and regulations, subdivision bylaws. And me, Nepra, and Nepra and I actually, we went through all of the regulations, and we talked to the planning board, we figured things out with engineering department, and basically we're trying to see how we can be more mindful of what's going on in Milton and how we can do it. A lot of our pollutants are going into Unquity Brook, and I'll show you, we have had an F on our report card for so long because we haven't necessarily been putting in the work to do so, and we haven't been able to fix the pollutants that we have in there. So the engineering department has put in a best management practice behind the police department. There's some within the new fire stations, and we will be putting in another one behind the school. There I am. Okay. So this year we had to go do the green infrastructure feasibility, as I talked about. They also require this year a schedule for how and when we're going to change some of the things that we have in Milton, so our regulations and our bylaws. Yeah, we can do the next one. So the stormwater is from runoff of streets and parking lots, and by putting in certain regulations, we can get a higher grade. So as you can see, Mine Brook and Purgatory Brook jumped more than 10% in their compliance grade in just 1 year. And we've gotten an F for both of these years, and we don't know what's going to come, but honestly, we've been doing stuff, but it has to change in our regulations and whatever's coming next. So talked about that. Yeah, so streets and parking lots are some problems, but if we know that regulations can be made to better treat our stormwater, we have to give the state a schedule that we will update it in. We have to also make certain that at a minimum, we specify in our regulations that we do allow green roofs, we do allow infiltration practices, including rain gardens, curb extensions, planter gardens, and pervious pavement. And we also allow, we explicitly allow water harvesting, like rain barrels for use of stormwater or for non-potable usage.
Okay, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So currently our stormwater bylaws, do they require even single-family homes to put the stormwater from the roof into a system that's not a rain barrel or rain garden?
So there's no necessarily, you can't use non-potable water for certain things. You can't, it's not applicable to gray water. You can't use gray water for certain things. But we could make it, we could do that, and that's something that they want us to put in our regulations and us to have a schedule for when we can put that in our regulations. This permit is technically a long-term permit, but this is not giving us a lot of leeway for when we can change these things.
But do our stormwater regs right now even allow for these other things? That's what I'm trying to understand.
They don't mention them, and that's kind of the problem with this
Right.
task rule. And I've talked to the building department, and they're like, yeah, technically we don't disallow it, but it requires the developer or the person themselves to come out forward with it. And that's one of the things that I'm going to put in later, that we should come out of the gate with that and say, can you do these? And if not, why? Why can't you do these things?
Right, because one of the things that I noticed over my time on the board is we get these large stormwater structures below grade, and that takes trees away. You can't put trees on top of them, and if we have less structures and we can do other things more naturally, it seems much better. But it's one of the things that I've been hoping we'd do in my tenure on the board, is to be able to do these things. And it really does require the engineering department to work on these. So I'm glad to see you're working on it, and I'd really be interested in making sure that we can figure out how we need to work together. If it's updating our rules and regs, something that the planning board has control over, I'd really like to see that move sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So I think the rest of Mira's presentation, I think, addresses a lot of these issues.
Okay, great, thanks. Sorry to
So
interrupt
also
then.
mention, we will be doing something behind the we'll be doing an infiltration basin behind the Collicott Cunningham School. And we're only taking down trees that are dying or smaller, basically. We are completely leaving all of the larger trees and anything that's still alive. And we want it to become part of an educational system for the kids who are going to Collicott and Cunningham, saying like, you can do stormwater management. It doesn't have to look like a basin. It doesn't have to look that way. It can look like trees. It can do this thing, and we can make sure that nitrogen and phosphorus are not part of our brooks and not killing things. We can do that, and that's kind of the whole point of this presentation, is using green infrastructure and nature-based infrastructure in order to do that, instead of the more, traditional gray infrastructure. So with NEPRA and with the Mass Audubon and the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission checklist, we went through everything. You can talk to Tim and Josh. I was bothering them for weeks, just saying like, what's going on and how can we change it? And again, it's tacit approval versus explicit approval. We can't expect everyone to add these things by themselves. We have to say at the end of the presentation, I do have a checklist from Franklin that says, why aren't you doing these things? Next slide, please. These are the ones I want to focus on today. These are kind of the less intensive ones out of this entire permit, and what I had to look, what we all looked through. So the ones that we're focusing on is specify that the tree belt can be used for stormwater management. So the belt that's right next to the sidewalk, we have to specify that it can be used for stormwater management. It can, and the engineering department is also working on this and creating a matrix for which stormwater management can go where. But it, again, has to be explicitly approved. And we can do this so that if there is a developer, it has to be managed by them instead of our DPW. That is part of what we can do. Again, in terms of that sidewalk right of way, we can accept permeable pavement. Again, the building department, they said basically, yeah, we could be okay with permeable pavement. Like, that's something we could do, but if we're not pushing that in the first place, it doesn't matter. If we don't have that, if we don't even say pervious pavement anywhere in our regulations or bylaws, it doesn't change anything. And another one in this is specifying for stormwater management is specify that a turnaround island can be used as a bioretention area. Because at this point, you can plant a tree on it, fine, but why aren't we doing these things? Using a site analysis checklist for low impact design, same thing that I've been talking about a couple times. Using our setback area, so there's a certain amount of setback area from property, and allow that for stormwater management practices, which we don't right now. 75% of vegetation and trees should be native. That was a lot of the last discussion, but it should be a requirement. The 75% minimum should be native and appropriate to the coming climate change, what will work best in that. Requiring directing clean roof runoff to landscaped or vegetated areas. That's pretty self-explanatory. And making sure that the site design process includes the minimization of site disturbance. We do have a stormwater credit that has to, or a stormwater permit that has to be filled out at a certain point, but we basically say at a certain point. We don't, before that, it's just kind of like, okay, you have to put in these management practices and putting hay bales or things like that, but why are we letting them do that in the first place? So I'm going to go into a little bit more specifics on all of them, so bear with me. Next slide, please. So for the specifying that the stormwater can be used, these are some of the words that we should use, and that is recommended by MS4, so the EPA and NEPRA and some other organizations that are very into these things. Tree belts may include bioretention areas or other vegetated stormwater systems. Bioretention areas should utilize non-invasive species that can tolerate cycles of drought and inundation. There are some pretty trees out there that would look great on the tree belt next to it. That's not the point. The point is what is native, what is non-invasive, and what can tolerate. Last summer was a very intense drought season for a lot of trees. The DPW is considering shifting our planting season because the spring trees might not survive the drought this year. And then again, allow for bioretention areas or other vegetated stormwater facilities within tree belt areas, and to count toward other required landscaping features, including site parking or perimeter screening. This creates areas that function on several area levels, including aesthetics and stormwater management. These, again, could be managed by the ongoing entity it's owned by, example being the HOA. And so we should also be clear in that the engineering department can do the same thing, that basically giving the engineering department free reign over this and saying, I mean, at the end of the day, some of it DPW has to deal with anyway. So you guys figure out what's best for you. Well, maybe I guess I'm part of the engineering department, but what works best and what is going to create less runoff to go in our drain system. Because at the end of the day, Milton has to deal with our drain system. We have to clean it, we have to keep it working, we have to line it, we have to do all of these things, we have to pay for it. Why aren't we letting the taxpayer basically have less of the taxes to going towards that and saying, okay, what if we can do it somewhere else? What if we can keep it in the stormwater management or in the belt? Next slide, please. Again, when appropriate, use of permeable paving is allowed for road shoulders and parking lanes in residential neighborhoods, and for sidewalks as compatible with 88 and Massachusetts Architectural Advisory Board design standards. So of course, compliant with certain things, it has to be the same amount of grade, all of those things, but it can be used. It does have some different management, so there are, sand can go in, and etc. Again, management does not have to be on the town. And we can also prefer it because that, again, creates less of a stress on our drain systems. The other thing is that alleys and low traffic or secondary emergency exits and all shoulders to use alternative permeable materials. So there is somewhat of a push against using permeable pavement in certain emergency areas due to the management of it. It doesn't have to be on every single road, but where we can do it, where it's low traffic, we can put it there, and that would work. And it would still have less management. It increases traction when it's wet, actually, instead of becoming a problem, because it doesn't pool and it doesn't need salt or plowing. So again, a whole section that the town itself does not have to deal with. The building department allows it. They're totally fine with it. But you have to go, as the developer, as the person dealing with this, you have to go and say, we're going to do permeable pavement. Again, why are we not pushing that in the beginning? And this is, again, some more words about how we can put that in. So allowing for residential drives, parking stalls, spillover parking spaces, emergency access ways with proper engineering support. Next slide, please. This is such a small thing. It's just such a small thing, specifying that the turnaround island can be used as a bioretention area. It doesn't look as nice when it's grass. It doesn't look as nice. Why not make it such a bioretention area? So all dead-end streets, all cul-de-sacs with turnaround islands may be planted with trees and or other vegetation, or left with natural tree growth, instead of paving the entire area of the island. The maintenance of the inner island, again, shall be the responsible of developers, their successors and assigns, or a homeowners association. Again, not putting it on us, but saying, honestly, it looks better, and it's better stormwater management than paving it. Next, please. And this is what I've been talking about. So Franklin actually does this. In the preliminary in the preliminary process, it would be a meeting with the planning staff and the board, strictly to discuss the usage of low-impact development practices and create an operation and maintenance plan for the practices that are implemented. Whether figuring out if DPW has to do it or figuring out, pushing it on the developers themselves and saying, you guys have to deal with this, but you guys have to do this, or why aren't you doing this? So practices such as green roofs, water harvesting, infiltration, green infrastructure, dealing with all of that from the get-go instead of going through the plans and then saying, okay, you said you were going to do this, why aren't you putting a green roof in it? In the beginning, if we say put the green roofs in, we would prefer you do that. It's easier on so next, please. Again, this is the actual checklist. So the goals would be create a visually appealing community, stabilizing and increasing property values, encouraging low-impact development, preserving the town's historic and cultural heritage, and protecting Franklin's natural environment, including habitat, water resources, and ecosystem services. Again, this would work so well for Unquity Brook. If we keep doing even these small practices, it helps. It keeps helping. Yes, we're doing these huge BMP practice, best management practices behind town, or behind the police department, in the fire stations, behind the school. Yes, those are big projects, but if we keep adding little drops, it's, my mom actually said it's a saying for us, it's every drop fills the bucket. It keeps filling the bucket. And it protects local and regional wetlands and water bodies, maximizes the groundwater recharge to retain a viable local groundwater supply, and minimizes pollution in stormwater management. Next, please. Again, this is the same thing, but this is based on erosion and sedimentation control and landscape design. Minimizing clearing and grading and preventing erosion and sedimentation. Landscape design, stabilizing water use at a sustainable level. So this would also be lessening water use in the landscapers or whoever is taking care of that, and creating landscapes that minimize habitat destruction and minimize habitat and maximize habitat value. Encourage the development of landscapes that provide environmental quality and visual relief through the planting of native and naturalized species. So this checklist has all of the possibilities and a thing of, are you doing it? Are you not doing it? And why aren't you doing it? And that would be addressed in that preliminary meeting. Next, please. Again, minimizing clearing and grading, planning and design checklist. Next, please. The next one that I was talking about, the setback areas of stormwater management, again, explicitly allow bioretention areas and etc. within required setback areas for front, rear, and side yards based on site-specific conditions such as soils, depth to groundwater table, and slope. We don't currently allow that. So that should be taken into account, because if you have a row of homes with little, cute little bioretention areas, that looks better and it works better. And it works better.
Can I ask you a question? You said we don't allow that. What's the document that doesn't allow it? Is it the stormwater regs? Is it the planning board's rules and regs?
It's not the stormwater regs. Okay. None of this is on the stormwater regs. All of this is on the bylaws and regulations. The
is it in the zoning?
Subdivision regs.
It's in the planning board's rules and regs?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So that was the whole, that's what we went over. That was the entire, that was the MS4 permit said you have to go through the regulations and such like that. So this isn't the stormwater regulations, this is all that. Next. Requiring at least 75% native plantings, and site design process includes minimization of site disturbance, directing the clean roof runoff to landscaped or vegetated areas capable of absorbing this. So streets shall be located and designed to minimize the disturbance of the site's natural features and environmentally sensitive areas, vegetation, trees, low areas, and cut and fill thereby reducing disturbance of native soils and unnecessary contouring of the site to preserve natural topography, because it's already been, nature's already been going at it and it's already decided where that water's going. Next. So at the end of the day, we should also talk about why we have to do these things. And some of it kind of seems common sense, but we should also add other reasons. The permit, first of all, we have to go on the permit. We're required to do this permit. It requires a schedule in which we will change our bylaws and regulations. And these are just the first smaller ones we have to think about. There's an entire green feasibility report that I can send out afterwards. It's 18 pages of what we need to do, why we need to do it. Storms and flooding are just going to get worse with climate change progressing, so we need to deal with that. Again, we need to be proactive about it instead of later on going, why is Milton flooding? And it's not just beneficial for stormwater, it can reduce the heat island effect, and on a different level, on a different side, it increases property value to have these aesthetically pleasing management practices. So there are a lot of neighboring towns, again, Franklin, some other areas that have already started this, and so we should be part of it, and we should be leading the charge as well. Thank you for having me again, and I hope that we can do something about this.
Thank you so much for presenting. That was excellent. Yeah.
And just to quickly follow up on Mira's presentation, I think the hope here is to, if the board wants to discuss this a little bit more tonight, great. May want to kind of have a little bit more of a further discussion later on. But I think as, planning and engineering staff, we would love to be able to present to the board at some point, a sort of a menu of regulatory and zoning changes that, decide to take them all at once but I think this was just meant to be sort of an introduction to, here's what we've got to do for this permit. I think it's consistent with a lot of stuff that the board's been talking about for a long time. So I'm hoping there's not a lot of debate, but more kind of, how exactly we're going to implement this stuff. But we would love to be able to put together some language, for you to sync it to, or future changes to the regs and potentially zoning changes.
I think we would all be in favor of that. I can't see why not.
Yeah, I hope you share it with the Selectmen and the Conservation Commission as they are suggesting taking land out of conservation and clear cutting it.
Yeah, so Tim, I don't know how the other members feel, but I would like to move on to our next agenda item tonight, but we can put that on, maybe for the 27th and just talk a little bit more about it.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Does that sound good? All right, we'll add that on the 27th. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all the work you're doing. Excellent work. So, on behalf of the town.
Well, we can count on your support for a lot of these things.
Yeah.
You said you have a report, whatever number of pages you said. I'd like to see that, if that can be sent to us. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's also on the town website if you were looking for that.
That can be a hard place to find things. Can you tell us exactly where on the town website?
Well, sure. We'll pass it around. No worries.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you again. Good night. Okay. So, all right. Now moving on. Sorry about that. Thank you. Welcome.
Meredith?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think this is the last agenda item. This is something that's probably going to be around after me, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna go.
That's fine. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Good night, Rich.
Good night.
Ned and JD, appreciate your patience. Just wanted to make sure Mira got out of here at a reasonable hour. Thank you.
Yeah, understood. I'm comfortable kind of just doing a brief overview. I tend to be in front of this board most likely 20 more times before we get to my overview.
No, we won't do it.
So Ned is here via Zoom. I'll let him open up, and then Tim has my presentation actually, so I'll go through the slides.
Great.
Thank you all. Good evening again. Ned Corcoran here with Josh Wild. We sort of an interesting point relative to proposals to redevelop one Elliott Street, one Adams Street property. It's a historic structure, currently occupied by a gym, some offices, some warehouse space, and Josh has a tremendous plan to sort of reinvigorate that and move forward. We're very close to sort of filing on multiple levels. We need state, local, and federal permits, although the federal is somewhat limited, but we need to file with MIPA, DEP, DCR, and Mass Historical Commission. On the local level, we need special permit from the planning board, potentially a variance from the Board of Appeals, particularly with respect to parking and other input. So with that, Josh has a pretty interesting PowerPoint to present, a slide deck that shows his vision. It's been adjusted somewhat significantly since the last time he was presenting it, probably a year or so ago, and we're pretty excited to get ready to sort of launch this into a public process.
Great, thank you, Ned. Tim, do you mind pulling up that slide deck that I sent you earlier today? And I apologize, I don't have paper copies with me, but I will have Tim circulate the deck so you can review that before the next time I'm in front of you. I'm going to stand up and present if you don't mind.
Yes. You need to grab that mic, JD. Yeah.
All right, yeah, Tim, if you could I'll just tell you the next slide, and you can just go through for me, please. So the goal of today is really just to give you a macro overview of the project. It's a pretty substantive project, especially for the town of Milton. So again, the goal, especially with being restrained on time, is to get in front of this board on multiple occasions and get a lot of collaborative feedback. I know a lot of effort from this town has already gone into the thoughts about Milton Village, so I know this is a very important project. If you go to the next slide, Tim. So again, just kind of reiterating, the presentation goal for today is to give you the big picture of what I'm trying to accomplish at that site, open up dialogue, collaborate with this board. I know Milton Village is something that everybody in this room it's very important to all of us. So I want to make sure that there's enough time, there's enough dialogue, and there's enough thought put into this because, I do live in the town. I'm not only a proprietor in this town, I own a business in this town. My children go to school in this town. I intend to reside here for the rest of my life. So I'm not an outsider trying to do a project in Milton. It's important to me as well. So if you go to the next slide, Tim. The mission of this project is really to transform the Webb Mill, which is the old chocolate factory, Josiah Webb. So I'll refer to it as the Webb Mill throughout this presentation, but it's to transform the existing Webb Mill into a dynamic, mixed-use, transient-oriented destination that activates the waterfront and serves as an economic engine for the town of Milton. And there's two things that are important in that statement. One is that we want to activate the waterfront there. Right now it's kind of no man's land. Access is really difficult. It's unsafe. As a proprietor, it's difficult to make investments into public access into that because it just doesn't make sense. So a project like this is large enough as to where we can really plan and do that in an intentional way. And the other thing that's really important is that it's transient oriented, and I genuinely believe that this could be a destination that's an economic engine for this town. If you go to the next slide, Tim, please. So I'm going to go into the design objectives now. So if you go to the next slide, Tim, if you're familiar with the building, this is the predominant vantage point that you see right now from the Adams and Elliott Street intersection. So this is the entrance to the gym right here. This is the entrance to Adams Street. This is essentially the property line right here. This is a survey. So just to give you site context, this building is existing. This building is existing. There used to be a building here, which was a pulverizing mill, and there used to be a building here as well. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you what we're looking to actually recreate kind of what was there historically. So if you go to the next slide. So when we started this design process, one of the first things that came to mind was how do we give the front building the proper credence it deserves to sit at the forefront of the design, and how do we not kind of modify what's clearly a beautiful, incredibly well-built set of infrastructure back there. So What you see here on the left is, I think, a pretty fascinating picture. This is actually the oldest picture I've been able to find of the site. So this is before the brick building that is here right now was built. Actually, the remainder of the mill was there. So when you hear the references to the oldest grist mill, this was actually the original site. The track that you see going along the site now, there's a track that's right about here, is actually this track. The bike path is here now, and the tracks are over here. So this nose right here is actually still existing. That's the rear building, so that is still there. This building, you'll see the gabled dormers. This is actually the shadow that's on the existing building. So they used to connect, and if you step back to now, it really feels incongruent. It almost feels like a municipal lot, like a water department building. So the goal is to reconnect those and bring back the original structure. So this is what was the pulverizing mill. If you go to the next slide, Tim. So these renderings are very initial massings, so please don't assume that this is what it's going to look like. This is really just to give you a visual kind of representation of what the connection would look like. So again, this front building's existing. This small office is actually there right now that is over the water. This small office is there. This rear building is there. This is the reconnection. So we would rebuild it to the size and scale of the original building. It would actually replace where the shadow is, and we would reconnect the two buildings. So the building right now is all commercial. As part of the overlay, we're proposing a mixed-use project. So we are proposing residential units on the upper floors for a total of 25 units. And we are proposing to keep the first 2 floors mixed-use commercial. And that would be a combination of gym, office, and restaurant space. Go to the next slide, please. So these are actually laser elevations done. The architect that I'm working with had someone go out and laser the entire site. So these are actually contextually accurate for size and scale. So again, as we move through this process, I'll have my rendering company do a really detailed kind of 3-dimension. This is really just for visual depiction, but all of these third floor elevations and top of windows are all actually relatively accurate. So the goal is to connect the two and recreate what used to be there. And if you look at old historic photos of the building, it actually shows this vantage of the waterfront. It's actually much more attractive. Right now, when you're standing at the bridge and you're looking at the site, it looks like a dilapidated building because it's not connected. Next slide, please. So again, this is if you're coming from Steel and Rye, walking down the bike path, this is the vantage you would see right now. There's actually a shadow of this right now. If you're standing at the bike path, as if you're walking from Steel and Rye and you're walking past the site and you looked left, this is what you would see. So we're proposing like retractable glass here on the ground level for a restaurant. Both sides would be retractable glass. There'll be a deck over the waterfront. I think you'll be really excited by some of the visuals that I have for those concepts. But this is commercial, this is commercial, this is commercial, this is residential. Commercial, commercial, residential from that vantage. Next slide, please. So this elevation will remain entirely intact. So this is the elevation you see right now from Adams Street. So if you're standing at Extra Space Storage, this is what you see. And then if you're standing on from the Bank of America building and you're looking across the street, this is, and we'll start to model this as we go through so you can see what you would see from the overpass there. But this is the vantage. So we're not proposing to modify this building at all, other than replace the windows and kind of do any repointing that's necessary. But I think we can all agree that this is a stunning building and it's incredibly important to the town of Milton. The goal is to kind of strengthen this building by making the rest of the site be congruent with its beauty. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through some rough massing floor plans just to give you an idea of how the building's going to lay out. And again, I know we're short on time, so I think the tail end of the presentation is a little bit more exciting and it's getting late. So the existing gym that's there now, I actually operate. That will be closed during the renovation and then we'll come back. So on the lowest level, this is where the restaurant you'd walk in. This is going to be a part of the restaurant. This is going to be the deck over the water that will be supported by the bar, restaurant, brewery component. This will be office retail. This is still up for debate what we do here. I personally like the idea of kind of like a bakery coffee shop. This does have access from Adams Street. So I think it would be great if we can leverage the infrastructure of the commercial kitchen that'll be here and have that service that. So maybe even potentially have 2 operators leverage the same kitchen. But this is the kind of the lowest level. If you go to the next slide. right now, the building has a handicap accessible entrance at the Elliott Street elevation. So the main building entrance would be still from this. Right here, we have a small retail space. Again, in a perfect world, I'm thinking like a juice bar, something fast, something takeout, something convenient. And then the gym would have multiple small rooms up here, like personal training room, cycling room, yoga room. And then this would be retail kind of function area for the commercial concept out back. And again, the idea there would be anniversary parties, wedding parties, baby showers, give Milton a place where people can go other than East Milton Village, because right now Milton Village is not much over there for that type of stuff. Next slide, please. This is how the residentials would work. They're all relatively small units. It's 25 units total. We have 4 3-beds, 7 2-beds, 5 1-beds, and 9 studios. So they're designed to be more transient units with the T right across the street. Like Ned said in the beginning of the proposal, we're not proposing any parking, so I do have parking in the rear there. The point that I think we're going to stand on is that whatever little parking we could structure back there is going to take away with us being able to activate that space and increasing pedestrian traffic. So I don't think any sort of benefits of getting those handful of spots back there would really do any substantive good. I think if anything, it would deter foot traffic. It would deter the flow of kind of commercial traffic going from the bike path up to Adams Street. Next slide, please. And then this would be the top floor as well. So just again, very early on, these are just kind of typical floor plans. Next slide, please. This is the gable dormer section, and then this is the fun part. Yeah, so this is, again, it's a stack. So the lower units have almost identical on this floor. This is the gable, so it's one big 3-bed at the top there. Next slide, please. So this is the fun part. So this is the visual that we want to start talking about as far as how to activate that rear, okay? So what you can see is right now, this green area is actually all parking, so cars come in and park nose in, and then we use this area over here as parking as well. What we're going to propose is a restaurant right here to connect the 2 buildings where I showed you in that infill, a deck over the water. Nothing would go beyond the original footprint of the building, so it would all be flush with the face of the exterior, so it's essentially recreating what was there. The 2-story building that's in the back there, the first floor would be a bar indoor space that would connect to the restaurant and flow to the outdoor space. The second floor would be a function room, facility, private events, corporate events, baby showers, and then the roof deck of that building would serve as a common amenity for the apartments. Because this is an existing building, we don't want to add any exterior decks. We do want to provide outdoor space specific to the residential units. So this will have a community grill up here, there'll be a community yoga class, this will be amenities for the building specifically. You'll see we've designed a wider bike path, walking path to get down to the bike path. And then this area over here, I actually do not own. Both Ned and myself have had conversations about what the process would be to start having a conversation with DCR. It's kind of no man's land there right now. It's all overgrown. It's dead brush. I would love to see this be a place you could come off and read a book, a bunch of bike racks, park strollers. Right now, I think spending a ton of time down there, one of the biggest impediments is that there's really nowhere to stop on that bike path. So you walk, and it would be beautiful if you could sit and have a conversation, have a business meeting. So I would be willing to commit to the ongoing maintenance and the cost of this as part of this project. Next slide, please. So I'll just give you some real quick design inspiration. The old rail line that's there, we actually want to reuse that and make like an interactive trolley thing for the kids. So imagine bringing in like an antique trolley that would sit on the tracks, and when you're sitting in that turf area and it's flexible space, the kids would have something to play around and it would slide back and forth. We're going to come up with brewery signs that'll kind of mimic the chocolate drying screens at the mill. The circular covers that are still there from the pulverizing mill, we're going to leave those. Those will be part of the floor that we're going to use for the outdoor seating area underneath the steel trellis. The design palette's going to match the local precedents, specifically the Baker's condominiums next door. My landscape architect who helped me work on this is actually the individual who did the upgrade to their patio area there out back. So we're gonna pull up the cobblestones that are there. We'll get other reclaimed cobblestones and we'll recreate the path. We'll pay homage to the hot cocoa and the chocolate flow with a really cool kind of dark stream through the middle of the path. And then the design features are really focused on bikes, exercise, community access, and then just an active kind of healthy lifestyle. Next slide, please. So what this is going to do is it's going to kind of break down each of these areas in sections to give you a little more detail. So this is a steel trellis. Right now I have a lot of kids that try to fish in the river and there's no safe access. So what we're proposing is a community fishing pier and then stadium seating. So these are stepped seats. So if you go to the next slide, Tim, please. These are all design inspirations. So this is an example of what the stadium seating will look like. So again, if a mom's kid wants to go fishing, she can go down there, she can read a book, she can take a call, she can sit on the stadium seating. This will all be public access. This won't be part of the restaurant. You don't have to go in there and consume any food. This is just a dedicated area for public access to the waterfront. This is what's kind of in our head for the design of the outdoor area. Steel trellis, lots of greenery, bistro lights, outdoor fire pit, picnic tables. This is kind of the energy we're going to be looking for, very comparable to a steel rye, where garage doors separate the two spaces, so you can close it on a rainy day, but have it wide open on a beautiful day. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like right now. These are the pulverizing mill covers. Very blank here. Just again, it's kind of, I keep calling it no man's land. If you go to the next slide. So this is what we're proposing. And again, these are rough graphics. This is a very early stage, but just conceptually, steel trellis, stadium seating, community access, outdoor area, dog friendly. I want to be clear that this is not like a brewery concept like Treehouse or Trillium. It's more of a steel and rye. It's more of a family friendly kind of food forward concept, less about beer and more about just the ability to sit outside with your family or dog and have a drink. Next slide, please. So this is the vantage if you were standing at the water looking back at the bike path. Next slide, please. And this is what it would look like from this side. So again, garage doors. We'd have an outdoor TV, so if it was, like a Patriots game was on or something that was kind of prominent, you could sit outside and entertain and really just kind of enjoy the waterfront there. Next slide, please. Again, we use it as parking. These are the pulverizing covers we're talking about integrating into the floor system there, so it's got this really cool antique look. Next slide, please. And this is what it would look like if you stepped inside of it. Not everybody will have a beard. Next slide, please. All right, so the next area we're going to focus on, if you see this is kind of the chocolate river we're talking about. It'll have low-level lighting built into it. So this is a flexible turf area. So right now, cars park nose in like this. And what we want to do is we want to make this the kind of outdoor flex space. So it's going to have a bunch of flexible seating, Adirondack chairs, maybe cornhole, or some sort of ring toss or some sort of fun outdoor game. We're looking at putting like maybe a couple of fire pits on a beautiful fall night. You can sit out here. This is the existing train track. And again, this is the concept I was referring to where it becomes like almost like a model toy train that the kids can play on. This right here is actually a storage container. And the thought behind this is that this will be pop-ups. So seasonally, in the fall and the winter when everyone's walking on the path, it could be, hot chocolate and cider and apple cider donuts. In the summer, it could be lemonade and popsicles. I've talked to several vendors who are incredibly excited about the idea of this. It doesn't have to be the same operator as the restaurant food establishment. I'm actually thinking the opposite, that this would be pop-up seasonally where operators could come in there on intermittent basis. Next slide, please. So again, here's kind of the design inspo, recreating the cobble paths with a color tone in the middle. This is kind of Cisco Brewers. This is what like a pop-up kind of situation looks like. This is not a storage container, but just to give you an idea of what it would be. These are examples of kind of signage of what it would look like back there. This is outdoor cornhole. This is actually a place on Martha's Vineyard. That is a perfect example of how it's family friendly. It's really more about food and just a place to hang out outside and entertain friends more than it is a brewery. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like right now. So again, if you're walking from Steel and Rye, this is the track that we're talking about reintegrating in the antique picture that I showed you. This is the original track. This was all ledge and stone in the mound. So this is actually how the train used to come in. Next slide. And this is what we'd be proposing to make it look like. So storage container, turf area, flexible seating, just consistent flow of traffic. And the way I think you want to think about this is that traditional commercial storefront is usually, podium style construction. It's usually on Ellie and Adam Street. I'm actually looking at the bike path as almost being commercial frontage. So I don't know if any of you have been to Bow Market in Somerville, but you almost walk through this small little alley and then you come to this like pop-up food mart. Very similar. I want to have a really grand kind of entrance as you come through the tunnel. So you come down this really ambient lighting and then you come through and all of a sudden it's totally different commercial frontage. We have a tremendous amount of foot traffic on this bike path, and I think it's an awesome opportunity to leverage that. Next slide, please. As you're coming down the tunnel, this is the vantage point. Next slide, please. And this is what we'd be trying to shoot for. So again, this is reflecting ping pong, but it's just representative flexible seating of Adirondack chairs. If you've got a big group, you can put them all together. Just common flow of all public access. And then anywhere that's part of the restaurant will be closed off with staff checking who's coming in, coming out. This is more anybody can come and you can hang out there. It's really just access. Next slide, please. So this is the area that I do not own right now. It's all just kind of overgrown weeds. Next slide, please. This is an example of what we were thinking for like timber style bench seating, kind of cool bike racks that tie in the rusted steel, the kind of the rusted Corten steel. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like right now. Again, just it's all brush. Truthfully, a lot of stuff is piled right here, which is still part of my property, and I've left it there because the lower deck area that we're going to rehabilitate as part of this project for the community fishing pier is actually kind of unsafe to be on, so I'm intentionally leaving it kind of overgrown so people don't go down there. Next slide, please. And this is what we would be looking to do. So again, it just gives you a reason to stop, especially if we have a storage container over there. Amazing place to read a book, stare at the water, take a phone call. Next slide, please. We want to add some historical informational plaques on the site. So as you enter the site, again, you kind of have this grand experience coming through the tunnel, but the same thing. If you're coming from the bike path, all of a sudden you say, wow, geez, what is this? We want to be able to kind of introduce them to the site and the historical heritage and give them some background on why the site's so impressive. Next slide, please. So this section I'm going to focus on right now is meant to show you the community roof deck. So this is exclusive to the residential units, and this would be exclusive to the restaurant. So two separate. These are both private. This is private to restaurant only guests, and this is private to the residents of the building only. Next slide, please. So this is the inspiration. This is the patio that my landscape architect did across the water for the Baker's condos. These are kind of the inspo of a community grill in an upper area. Next slide, please. This is the building right now. Again, no man's land. No man's land. We try to bring that back, and then we try to activate this roof deck area. Next slide, please. And this is what we'd be proposing. So you'd come out from the common hallway that's there. There'd be a seating area, and this would be the only outdoor space for the entire building. Community grills. Again, I'm imagining community yoga classes up here, community meditations, book clubs. I own a real estate brokerage. We do a lot of sales, and a lot of the buildings that have common amenities, common roof decks, are very well utilized. Oftentimes people do gatherings, they invite friends over. It actually becomes a really cool amenity. We make a lot of friends, and it builds a community in the building. Next slide, please. This is just a different vantage if you were standing over here. And again, none of this is final. This is more just for conversational purposes to show you kind of where we're thinking. Next slide, please. Just another vantage. Next slide, please. So this is, right now I use this for storage of my construction company. This is the rear building. This is where there used to be a building that we're proposing to build a new building. This lower area would still always maintain being empty because of FEMA flood levels. We can't actually put anything down there. So most likely just have flood doors here where water could come in and out if it ever had a 100-year flood. Since I've owned the building, I've never seen water here, but I do know that it has happened in the past. Next slide, please. This would be the deck over the water that we, so again, it would flow to the restaurant. If you can imagine, the inside would be a very similar to Steel and Rye, just a lot of exposed red brick, a lot of kind of intentional, like almost stuff you find in your garage that looks intentional, but it's really unintentional. You go inside here, this is actually an over-refrigeration unit, which is where I have my shop right now, and that would become like the inside brewery side. I don't believe we're going to brew on site. Most likely we're going to partner with some brewers and serve their beer at the location. Again, I want it to be more of a gastropub, food-forward concept where we do have multiple beer options, but by no means do I want this to be beer only with just, hot dogs and pretzels. I think this is the last slide. Is there another slide, Tim? Is this it? I think that's it.
That's it.
So
Just
that's,
our
the
Lex
vision for the
Luthor looking friend.
I'm open to any sort of questions, conversation. Again, the goal is to just get you all thinking about it. So as we come back, I think coming from the Granite Ave presentation, there's probably a lot of items that you guys talked about, thought about. I'm hoping to take in some of those, be able to put together competent answers, and come back to this board on multiple occasions. And ultimately, as Ned and I go through this process, seek your approval.
Well, I think it's incredibly exciting. I think this is just going to be a huge, just greatly add to Milton. Very unique setting, and I think the level of thoughtful detail down to what the bike racks are going to look like. I love just everything and your vision for the site, and I think it's exciting. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I have some very exciting operators that I'm in conversations with. They're all kind of at that point where it's like, let me know when it's a little more certain.
Right.
But part of the reason we're so intentional about the design is because the more thoughtful the design, the more exciting the project is, the better the talent that's going to come in there. So,
Yeah.
And that's really important to me. Again, these are not condos. These are their upper units will be rentals. I'm intending on holding this building for the rest of my life and handing it to my children. So it's important that the right person goes in there. It's important to me that they're successful. It's important that we do it right because, again, it's a massive investment on my behalf, and I want to do it right the first time. So.
I agree with Meredith. It's exciting. When we did all the work in Milton Village, the overlay zoning, I spent a ton of time walking that neighborhood at different times of the year, and it's so beautiful. The waterfront is just so beautiful. It's so unique. The Baker Chocolate there. I mean, you didn't even talk about looking across the river. The Baker Chocolate buildings are beautiful to look at too, and the bike path. I go on. I ride my bike on it. I walk on it all the time. And you're right. I agree with you 100%. There's no place to stop off of it. I mean, you used to be able to go into the Plate, on Central and get a sandwich or something there, but it would, to have a place to. You can get over and get to the ice cream smith, but nothing's really like right there. And so I think this would be the first project coming in under that overlay. And what a super project to be the first one. I mean, really. So we have to talk about that, how we think the function spaces would work without any parking. I mean, I think there's right now, that's just a thing that we're going to have to think about, and that because people will come for a function, right? So they're going to get there some way, and but I understand that that's going to be important for making everything work here. Like all these pieces need to work, but the parking is going to need to work too because the burden could fall on people that live nearby. So we'll have to work together to figure that out.
Yeah,
I keep thinking Extra Space Storage has a lot of space, and we were hoping and envisioning that maybe they could work with, other property owners in the district there.
Yep.
I know that maybe you'll have a little bit better luck reaching them out in the Midwest, wherever they are.
I have contacted them. They are open to the conversation.
Oh, good.
They're a real estate investment trust, so I don't think they have any level of urgency or intimacy to the town, but. Both Extra Space Storage has expressed interest. The Baker condos across the water. I presented both Ned and I met with the president of their board, presented to them very early on to make sure that there wasn't going to be any opposition from across the river. They were extremely excited. They opened up the door for a conversation about utilizing some of their back parking because they have that massive lot there in the back. They were very, very helpful in looking to support the project based on the initial conversations. I also own some additional parking up the street, which could be off-site parking during off hours. So that we're certainly looking at ways that we can try to take advantage of that. And I do think that Elliott Street is one of the few areas of Milton where a concept like this could utilize some of that parking, because towards the evening hours, that parking is very flexible. There is a lot of parking down there. I'm down there all the time. I rarely ever, if ever, have a spot even parking close to the gym, let alone at nighttime, there's almost no one down there. So I think there's, for not having any parking, as far as Milton goes, there's probably no better option for a location that would have to leverage public parking because of the Elliott Street circumstance.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were looking at when we did the zoning, we did look at the parking utilization with Beta. We're anticipating that if the build out happens, we'll need to do some sharing across properties, right? Mm-hmm. So like one property wouldn't be able to take all the public asset of parking. Yep. So that's another thing to sort of think through, because every site there is challenged by how to handle the parking, and I certainly believe in transit and the residential units and even people coming to the other amenities there. I think we'll have to think about the functions, and you get a lot of people there who are coming for a function. Where would they go? And maybe it's just depending on what time of day, and days of the week that those functions are held, right? Maybe there's something that limits that.
With respect to parking, and one of the things that, a couple of things, when I permitted the building that never got built, which is the restaurant and kind of building across the street on the front side of the extra space storage property, we had a parking sharing calculation that went into how parking would be allocated across different times of day for different uses. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly one of the things we would look at. We also did a very careful analysis of the volume of parking spaces that are available and what their time of usage was. Most of the village parks sort of 8 to 6, 8 to 5. There's nothing else down there that is open and operating in the evening. The gym is open, but there really isn't anything else. And you have to sort of go up and over Elliott Street to get to the parking supply that helps to serve Steel and Rye and Central Square. So it's an interesting calculation. We really need to start looking at, what does the zoning require relative to parking? What are the options available from an off-site perspective to have agreements for parking? And then what's also available on street? And when and how are they available? And how do they mesh with the types of uses and when those uses are going to be sort of drawing most heavily on those parking spaces? So it's an interesting issue. It's something we need to look very carefully at. I think the two biggest issues relative to this development are parking and potentially some form of a variance for parking with the support of this board. And also the Chapter 91 issues, because the property overhangs the river. Chapter 91, it is titled to the dam, and so Chapter 91 and DEP has significant oversight as to what happens. Everything else is really sort of pretty straightforward to manage, but those are on the state level and on the local level two significant issues that we have to spend some time on and work through.
So that's on the sort of legal side. On the visionary side, I have felt like a public-private partnership on parking would be a way to solve the whole district kind of parking situation. So like they've done in other communities. I was in Attleboro a month or two ago. Attleboro has built parking garages, actually, and then the residential developers don't have to build the parking within their buildings. They have to supply their parking through the municipal garage. similar to Quincy Center. They did the same thing. They built a municipal garage, and they leased spaces to the condo development or the rental apartment developments that went in at the same time. And so that public-private partnership helps pay for the garage, but it also relieves the pressure of each individual property to have to build the parking themselves. So that is something, if you can get into extra space, and if you can figure out whether there's a way to do some kind of more neighborhood-oriented parking there, that would help the other properties as well. So I just say that as a visionary, because you've talked to a lot of different people, you've got a lot of great visionary ideas. Maybe that's something you can think about. You can, if you're talking with Extra Space, talk to them about.
Absolutely, thank you.
You've got other property there too, right? So
Yeah.
that would benefit, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Having worked with Extra Space over a long period of time, that'll be an interesting set of conversations.
He's got a visionary magic he's going to work over here, Ned.
Good luck, guys.
You know, it's a very interesting company based in Salt Lake City, Utah. They are a massive publicly traded REIT.
Well, that's an unfortunate use, right, in that kind of an area. I mean, I understand it's a storage building and it made sense, but you know, not to have an active use there is a real missed opportunity.
I will tell you that
right?
back in 2005, 6, 4, 5, when their use was permitted, everybody in town was disappointed because I was part of a committee that was appointed by the select board in the late 90s, early 2000s that looked at revitalizing the village. And, you know, we looked at a whole bunch of different things. The fire that occurred at the old freezer storage plant on the Hood site led to zoning for both, Wharf Street and Extra Space storage. Unfortunately, the Extra Space team came in and said, look how great we are. We have low impact. We don't have any traffic. We don't need parking, and we're quiet, and we pay good taxes. And we all looked at them and said, no, wrong use. We want this to become a place that gets revitalized. We want new energy. We want new whatever. It just didn't happen at that location. But they do have, in their current configuration, plenty of extra parking down there that could become available if we can work out some sort of a deal. And so we'll explore that.
Great.
But that parking would not be available had the building that was permitted been constructed. You know, we had a groundbreaking in 2008 for a building that never got built.
I also think it's a great project. Revitalizing that area, I think, is great. And creating the kind of spaces that you're talking about, in my opinion, it's better than making it 100% residential because it creates within the town opportunities for people to stay in town and to enjoy the town, much like has happened over time. You know, what's happened in East Milton Square with the Vara, Abbey Park, and Steel and Rye, and you're continuing that same concept. So I think it's great. I'm sure the board will be happy to see this as it evolves and do what we can to help you get there.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
Very exciting, yeah. Really cute, and I don't know, it's just, it's exciting to see good development coming. So congratulations.
Thank you. I look forward to being back in front of this board on numerous occasions. I'll connect with Ned on the next steps, and we're looking to move forward at this point. So this was really just informational, but moving forward, again, I appreciate all of your time. I'm looking forward to further
Just
conversation.
one thing I would say, JD, too, is take a look at the design guidelines that were passed not that long ago for that infill. And the more, and if you really do want it to, well, I don't know if you're going to explore historic tax credits, but you should. And if you, because they could give you some
Yeah, I
you know,
think
sort of
we are gonna
freebie money, right?
I've hired a historical consultant.
Yeah, okay, good. But, you know, it won't apply to that infill.
Yep.
But if you have to go to the Mass Historic Commission, they might be paying attention to what that infill is going to look like. Historic record's good for that, too. But the guidelines would be helpful for that as well, for that new construction, right?
Yep.
The Historic Commission will guide you on the restoration, I'm sure. And then if you do historic tax credits, you'll have to do the National Park Service. So but Mass Historic coordinates that as well. But I don't think you'd have any trouble, and it would be a good source of your financing, state and federal.
Thank you very much. We look forward to
Thank you for
seeing you again soon. We hope.
This is earlier than some.
Yes, good. Thank you for your waiting. Okay. Great. So with
Thank you.
that, thank you, Ned. Good night.
Thanks, Ned.
So with that, we are finished with our agenda and ready for a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second? Okay. Roll call. Cheryl?
Yes?
Sean?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you, everyone.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.